And we want to know if there are any procedural questions that Lieutenant Block or his attorney have.
This is being held in executive session, Fred?
Say that again?
Is this hearing being held in executive session?
No.
It is not. I don't think it can be.
If it's personal matter, it can be.
No, there's actually a Connecticut Supreme Court case that
This part of the hearing will not be an executive session.
Okay.
I might want to remind everyone who's going to testify that you're going to be under oath. You should be as honest as you possibly can be.
I don't think so.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
procedural question?
Yeah.
Could I ask if we go around the room for introductions,
Oh,
so
sure.
we know who everyone is?
Yes, Kevin.
May I just ask for a moment just to get my client waiting in the hallway?
I understand exactly. Yeah, I understand, right.
Shut your phone off.
Kevin, your question was that everyone should identify themselves?
Please.
Okay. We'll start with the left.
Jeff?
Lieutenant Jeffrey Block.
Attorney Craig Nanamite?
Lieutenant John Buccarati.
Captain Bob Calamaris, Captain Chris Tercy, Chief Chris Liddy.
David Zabel, I'm serving as counsel for the town of the department from Marino, Zabel, and Schellenberg.
James Baldwin, town attorney for the town of Fairfield, representing the commission.
Which all pretty evident who we are, the two police commissioners. So here we are.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Deputy Chief Don Smith with the police department.
Yeah.
Should we begin the proceedings now?
Well, we have one more exhibit, David, we need to
That's fine.
amend.
Well, we can just add it at the end and say it's part of the
Exhibit 14? Okay.
Exhibit 14.
You want to begin by reading the exhibits into the record?
Sure.
Any objection?
Okay.
You all have copies of the exhibits?
I have not handed them out yet.
Okay. Exhibit 1 will be the complete IA file for Internal Affairs Investigation 2019-12, I'm sorry. Exhibit 2 will be audio recording of the...
By the way, can you wait until we pass these?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry.
True that for you?
Oh, no.
Thank you, Jack.
Exhibit 2 will actually be an audio recording that we have on a thumb drive that will play on the computer. The court reporter has the original exhibit, and so we'll play it for you so there's not a written document of that exhibit. Exhibit 3 is a copy of the IA file for Internal Affairs Investigation 202001.
got enough?
Exhibit 4 is a set of text messages from November 30th, 2019.
The text messages are between Lieutenant Block and Captain Tercey.
Exhibit 2 is a thumb
Oh,
drive.
that's the thumb drive.
Video.
No, that's it. Put that on.
Exhibit 5 is also another series of text messages between Captain Tercey and Lieutenant Block. For the record, the handwriting that appears on Exhibit 5 is not plain. Those were notes of times that you had indicated to me at the last hearing of when the
text messages were sent, because it's difficult to read on the text itself, so it's 9:59 in the morning. Becker? I don't remember the time. You took off the phone and showed me. Oh, then, that would be right.
Exhibit 6 is another text message from August 11, 2019. Exhibit 7 is another series of text messages. I think it's November 27th. I don't know what year.
It is November 27th of 2019 between Captain Tercey and Lieutenant Block.
Exhibit 8 will be a copy of the contract. Craig, I believe you have the copies.
I left them under the exhibit tags.
Okay. That's not marked, so you have to mark it as Exhibit 8.
You know the date. Exhibit 8. If you want to mark it, it's not marked. Exhibit 8. Exhibit 8.
Sure, I got it.
Thank you.
Exhibit 9 is just a copy of an email, and it's offered because it's an email, a portion of which is cut off in the Exhibit 1 in the IA file, so it's just a complete copy of an email from Exhibit 1 that's included in Exhibit 1.
It should be on page 14 of Exhibit 1.
Right.
And is a June 20th, 2020 notice from Chief Liddy to Lieutenant Block concerning a notice of hearing concerning consideration and recommendation for disciplinary action. One extra.
This is Exhibit 11 is the memo that was issued from the Secretary, from Chief Liddy, concerning his recommendation for discipline. You.
Exhibit 12 is a May 30th, 2019 email from Captain Tercey to Lieutenant Block concerning Lieutenant Block's working hours and assignments while in the Administrative Services Bureau. Exhibit 13 is a second scheduling order dated July 23rd, 2019 from Captain Percy to Lieutenant Block concerning additional scheduling orders while assigned to Administrative Services Division. And finally, Exhibit 14.
Yeah.
Do you have copies of 14?
I don't have copies of 14.
Captain Smith, did you bring copies?
I could bring permits.
Need 8, do you have it?
I think I made 10.
Oh, perfect. And we're calling this.
Exhibit 14, that's again, a copy of an email, a full copy of an email that's included in Exhibit 1 on page 12 of Exhibit 1 that was cut off and not complete in the exhibit itself, so that's a full copy of that email. And I think those are all the exhibits we marked, so. You ready, Chris?
I am.
Okay. So the department goes Lieutenant Green.
Do we want to do openings or?
I don't need to do an opening. I think we can just do some brief closing. I think, would you like to do an opening?
No, okay. Well, actually, I would.
Okay. Okay. So very simply, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the department, this is a hearing in which the commission is to consider whether or not to impose on Lieutenant Block based on charges that have been filed with the Secretary of the Commission. But it is the department's position that the 2I investigations resulted in findings that Lieutenant Block deliberately disobeyed an order that was given to him, passed on to him by Captain Percy from Deputy Chief Smith on November 30th, 2019, and that during the investigation, and in particular during the interview of Lieutenant Block in that investigation, he was untruthful. It's those simple facts that the recommendation for discipline is based upon. We believe that the nature of the offenses charged warrant the discipline be imposed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Craig Manamite, and I'm the attorney for the Fairfield Police Union. Tonight I am here on behalf of union member Lieutenant Jeffrey Block as a result of the chief's recommendations that Lieutenant Block be disciplined for certain conduct he allegedly engaged in, which purportedly violated certain departmental procedures. It's the union's position that pursuant to the terms of the collective bargaining agreement between the town and the union, employees may only be disciplined for just cause. Therefore, the union is of the opinion that the Honorable Commission analyze the facts of this case and determine if just cause exists to discipline Lieutenant Block. The contract, however, does not define just cause, so the relevant inquiry thus becomes what constitutes just cause. The most commonly recognized guideline for analyzing just cause was articulated in a case called Enterprise Wire Company by arbitrator Carol Daughtry. Arbitrator Daughtry asked these specific 7 questions to ascertain whether just cause existed. First question, was the employee warned of the consequences of his conduct? Second question, were the employer's rules or orders reasonably related to the safe and efficient operations? Did the employer investigate before administering discipline? Fourth question, was the investigation conducted fairly and objectively? Fifth question, did the investigation produce substantial evidence or proof that the employee was guilty as charged? Sixth question, were the rules, orders, and penalties applied even-handedly and without discrimination? And the final question was the degree of discipline administered in a particular case reasonably related to A, the seriousness of the employee's proven offense, and B, the record of the employee in his service with the company. A no answer to any of the aforementioned questions would result in a finding of no just cause for discipline.
Do you have a citation for that?
I do. It is Enterprise Wire Company and Enterprise Independent Union, 46 LA 359, pages 362 through 365, and it's a 1966 case. In my experience, it's widely used and it is the standard for analyzing just causes cases in the State Labor Board. It's the union's position that there is no just cause and that Lieutenant Block has not violated any of the departmental policies that he is being accused of violating. We are here today mainly because Lieutenant Block is accused of being untruthful and dishonest. He was also charged with insubordination and a violation of the department's standard of conduct. But you will see through testimony and exhibits today that the chief has already indicated that he intends to issue Lieutenant Block a verbal warning for those violations, which, if he does in fact do that, the union will be contesting, as we do not believe there is just cause for that. I'm going to address the untruthfulness charges because after the commission hears testimony and sees evidence, it will become evident that Lieutenant Block was not being untruthful and at most had a faulty recollection when he gave testimony to Lieutenant Green as part of the IA investigation. That being said, I will leave the remainder of my proofs when I put my case on. Thank you.
Yes.
As I said, I called from Ed Green.
Sir,
Yes, please.
raise your right hand, please. Solemnly swear testimony about to give in the case in question shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, to help you God.
I do.
Would you state your name, please, for the record?
Edward Green.
I assume you don't want addresses. I just need to be directed. Is the name alone sufficient?
Name and address.
100 Reef Road, Fairfield, Connecticut.
Mr. Green, are you currently employed with the Fairfield Police Department?
I am not.
When did you?
I am, I'm sorry, it's a part-time position.
Part-time.
I recently retired.
Okay. And how long were you employed with the Fairfield Police Department?
Over 26 years.
And what position did you hold at the time of your retirement?
I was a lieutenant in professional standards.
And please tell the commission when you retired.
August 3rd, last week.
And what were your positions, duties, and responsibilities as a lieutenant for professional standards while you were with the Fairfield Police Department?
Responsibilities include internal investigations, policy and procedure, the internship program, and some other administrative duties.
And while you were employed with the Fairfield Police Department in 2019, did you conduct an internal affairs investigation for a matter involving Lieutenant Jeffrey Block, IA 2019-12?
I did.
I'm going to hand you a document that's been marked as Joint Exhibit 1. Could you identify for the commission what Joint Exhibit 1 is?
Is the investigation.
The report that you prepared.
Yeah, well, the first page is not the report. The first page is the conclusion of my investigation, and then the report follows.
Now, please explain to the commission what you did in connection with your investigation in IA 2019-12.
Okay. Deputy Chief Smith had met with me. He had told me he wanted me to conduct an investigation regarding an overtime shift that Lieutenant Block had worked. It was the Deputy Chief's contention that he had communicated through Captain Searcy a directive that Lieutenant Block was not to work the shift.
And did you interview witnesses and consider documents in connection with your investigation?
I did.
Please explain to the commission what witnesses you interviewed and what documents you considered.
Deputy Chief Smith, at the conclusion of our meeting, provided me with a letter to me, an official Fairfield Police Department letter. In that letter, he had laid out why he was requesting the investigation. In the letter, he had stated that on December 5th, Lieutenant Block was in the schedule to work an overtime shift.
Is the letter that you referred to included in your report? It's about halfway in. It's a letter to you. It's a letter or memo to you dated December 5, 2019 from...
The letter was submitted as evidence. The letter is, I probably talked about the letter in my report. What page are you on?
Page of the report. It's about halfway down. It's a letter after page 7 of the.
Okay. When you say report, I believe that you're asking me my specific report that I submitted. There is. Okay, I do see the letter.
Just to clarify, Exhibit 1 is a copy of the documents in your file concerning IA Investigation 2019-12, including your report and the supporting documents that you reviewed in connection with the investigation. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the letter that we've identified dated December 5, 2019 is the letter that you just referred to that you received from Deputy Chief Smith initiating the investigation.
Correct.
Okay. So now, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you please continue on what you did after you received this letter?
My first interview was conducted with Captain Searcy. I believe that was the following day. That's correct. On the following day, after my meeting with Deputy Chief Smith, I had interviewed Captain Searcy.
And is the substance of your interview included in your report at page 2 where it says witness statement Captain Searcy?
That's correct.
And so what did Captain Searcy, do you recall anything that Captain Searcy said to you other than what was said in portion of your report?
Yeah, I explained that I was detailed to conduct an investigation regarding this particular overtime shift, and I needed to question him to his knowledge about it. He had stated to me that he had initially approved the swap, and when I say swap, I mean he's talking about moving this overtime shift from Friday, I believe, if I remember correctly, to a Sunday, December 5th, which was a Sunday. He stated to me that he approved it, but at the time he did not know the swap that he had approved was a recall or an overtime shift.
And did Captain Searcy explain to you what he communicated to Lieutenant Block after he had initially approved the swap to tell him that it was no longer approved?
Yes, Captain Searcy had told me that he was instructed by Deputy Chief Smith that the swapping of recalls are not permitted, or swapping of the overtime shift is not permitted, and that he was to communicate to Lieutenant Block that 1, swapping of recalls is not permitted, and 2, that he's not to work the overtime on December 5th, as he had indicated he was going to do in our electronic schedule.
After you interviewed Lieutenant Searcy, did you interview anyone else in connection with your investigation?
I did.
And who did you interview?
I interviewed Lieutenant Block.
And in connection with that interview, was a copy of that interview session recorded?
It was, yes.
And you previously reviewed an electronic copy of that recording that is now included as Exhibit 2 in these exhibits. Is Exhibit 2 a true and accurate record of the recording of your interview of Lieutenant Block on December 12, 2019?
It is.
we'll play that in a minute, but I'm going to continue some questions at this point in time. So after you talked with, interviewed Lieutenant Block, did you record in your report the substance of the significant points that you gleaned from that interview?
Yes, I did.
And is that included on pages 2 and 3 of your report, where it talks about the subject statement, the following testimony was recounted by Lieutenant Block in a digitally recorded interview?
That's correct.
Okay. During the interview of Lieutenant Block on December 19th, did you ask him about the circumstances under which Captain Tercey had communicated to him the order that the swap of the recall shift was not permitted and that he was not to work on Sunday, December 1?
Yes, I did.
And what do you recall, actually? So at this point, I'm going to offer the recording, and I'm going to suggest, with your permission, that I only need to put in a portion of the recording. If you'd like the commission to listen to the whole interview, we can do that instead. The portion of the interview that I want to direct the commission's attention to begins at roughly the 6-minute mark and ends around the 16-minute mark.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm going to try this one.
Where was that opportunity? Okay.
Is that loud enough for everybody to hear, or do I have to come closer? Then I have to come to the middle of the room with the computer. That might be easier to hear it. Mm-hmm.
Now, I spoke to Captain Tercey, and here's what he explained to me. Did you have a conversation, do you recollect a conversation on the morning of Saturday, December, just before, the day before Sunday, December 1st, I'm sorry, November 30th, yeah. November 30th, Saturday morning, if you remember a phone conversation in which he said you did not work Sunday. I don't think it was a phone conversation. He came to the office, and I thought, I don't remember what day it was, but I remember him peeking his head in and saying, do you want me to go into what I recollect him saying? Well, I want to know if you recall him telling you that you could not work the following day. Okay, the following day I'm not sure about because I'm not sure it was Saturday, so again, that's my technicality thing. All right, I'll rephrase the question. Do you recall a conversation prior to December 1st in which Captain Tercey said to you, you cannot swap your recall days and you cannot work Sunday overtime? I don't remember him saying you can't swap. I remember him saying, and this is what I remember, he said, Broderick complained about you again, complained to the deputy chief. Deputy chief saw you're working overtime on Sunday and said he can't do that. Tercey and I talked, and I said, do you recall saying I could swap? And I said, what rule is there that says I can't swap a recall? And whatever conversation we had triggered something in his mind to where he goes, that makes sense, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically, hold on, I'll go talk to the deputy chief. So whatever I had explained to him at that point turned him around enough Maybe he didn't remember that he had authorized the swap. Maybe when Tercey poked his head in, thought I had simply entered overtime on the Sunday. I don't know what was in Tercey's mind, but it was left on hold, the decision, when Tercey left to go talk to the deputy chief. Is that clear?
It is. So is your understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the subject of you working Sunday, December 1st was not final?
Right.
He was going to go back to the deputy chief?
Correct.
Okay. For what reason?
Because maybe he had forgotten that he had authorized the swap. Maybe he didn't realize the reason the recall was in there. So he came in going, hey, you can't work a recall Sunday, which makes total sense. I mean, I would have done the same thing in his spot. But when I reminded him, you said it was okay to swap from Friday to Sunday, maybe he had this aha moment, oh yeah, that's why you're in for Sunday. So he goes, let me go talk to the deputy and explain that.
He had said in my interview with him that he did, in fact, initially authorize the swap. He said he wasn't in the office at the time and did not realize it was a day that it was a recall day. He was under the assumption that it was a regular work day that he wanted to swap.
Totally.
And he's like, yeah, and if that was the case, I had no problem with it. And he said, once it was brought to his attention, that it was in fact a recall day, and the deputy chief directed him that he in fact then contacted you and said prior to December 1st and said, this is what he had said to me, you cannot work that day. You can't work it. It's a recall day and you're not allowed to swap recall days.
Well, he didn't use all that language, and I agree with just about everything there, except the fact that if when the deputy chief told him, hey, he can't swap his recall, then why would Tercey have talked to me, said, hey, you can't work it, and then whatever I said turned him around to go back to the deputy?
Right. And I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, and I don't either, but I'm just saying, if he had really realized, wait a minute, yeah, he can't do that, you're right, deputy, he can't do that with a recall, nothing would have turned him around when I talked to him to go back and explain.
Okay. Aren't you able to swap recall days? You've done it in the past.
I have done it in the past.
So why are we saying you're not allowed to swap recall?
I don't know. I'm investigating whether he violated direct order. It's my understanding you cannot. I don't swap recall days.
Is there a written rule that you can? Because chronologically, I'm confused. The swap, as I understand it, took place on Thursday evening, 6 o'clock. That's when the request was made to Tercey, and he approved it on Thursday. So I'm assuming nothing happened on Friday. You didn't work. You were supposed to do a recall day on Friday, right? You entered it into POS.
Entered Thursday or whatever.
Whenever, yes, you were into the recall.
Correct.
And then you swapped, so you moved the anticipated work on Friday to work on Sunday. So the question is, Saturday, the day before Sunday, obviously, the 30th, there was a conversation. That's what you had just asked about.
I don't remember if it was Saturday or not. I remember him poking his head into the office. I don't remember if I worked Saturday, so it's a technicality, but whether it was Friday we talked or Saturday, I don't remember. But the crux of that is correct.
What I'd like to clarify, if you could, Jeff, is if Captain Tercey received an order from the deputy chief saying, tell Jeff he cannot work Sunday, and the captain told me he went to you and says you cannot work Sunday per the deputy chief because you cannot swap recalls.
Except that last part I agree with. I don't remember him explaining.
You don't remember the swap and recall. He didn't give you that information on why he couldn't work?
No. Because that's why I brought it to Tercey's attention. That I remember thinking, he doesn't realize I swapped. He just thinks I'm working a recall Sunday. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, do you realize that I swapped from Friday? So I don't remember thinking they knew I had swapped. I think they just thought I put a recall in for Sunday at that time.
Okay.
That's why I mentioned it to Tercey, and that's why Tercey goes, oh yeah, or however he phrased it, let me go talk to the deputy.
Okay. Once he told you
that you cannot work Sunday, and he says, I'm gonna go talk to the deputy, did he ever say, you know what, you can work it, let me talk to the deputy, did he ever change that order?
He kind of put it on hold, was my feeling. Did he say, well, hold on? I don't remember his language, but my feeling was, all right, delay the order and let me go find out. That's why I sent him an email Saturday evening, whatever, I think it was Saturday evening. That since I haven't heard back from you.
Yeah.
So maybe, you know what, it probably was Saturday we talked. Because when I sent that email was the same day that we talked.
Right, you know, that was Saturday night.
Yeah, I just didn't remember when we originally talked.
Okay. What would Captain Terzi have to go back to the deputy chief about after the deputy chief ordered him to tell you can't work it?
My feeling, because he didn't realize it was a swap. He thought when he saw the recall on Sunday that I had just entered a recall, hey, I think I'll work on Sunday.
Okay.
But at that point, I'm like, do you remember authorizing me to swap from Friday to Sunday? At that point, maybe he went, oh yeah, that's why it's there.
What happened after you worked it? Were you ever contacted by the deputy chief or Captain Terzi to say?
Yeah. It might have been Wednesday. I actually had it here. Terzi texts me, says the deputy chief just calls me and wants to know if you actually did go in on Sunday. I said yes, and that was the end of it until I got a letter saying I'll be investigating this.
The letter was from the deputy chief?
Yeah.
So when Captain Terzi asked you, did you work, you told him you had.
He said, did you go in?
All right, did you go in? You don't like going to work.
Well, yeah, exactly, because I know that's the crux of it.
I'm not trying to be coy or anything. I'm just, I'll use different terminology.
Did I come in?
If you came in on Sunday and you told, when he asked you that, did you come into the department on Sunday and you said I had, what was his response to you? And then, I think I have it here.
Did Captain Terzi tell you whether these were face-to-face conversations or text message conversations?
He had told me, he gave me, here, my notes, somewhere through email, I don't remember off the top of my head right now what some of the communication with him was through deputy chief, and some of the communication was through Captain Terzi. But I can tell you that Captain Terzi had told me, when he had told him that he could not work Sunday, that was in a phone conversation.
I remember seeing them face-to-face. I could look it up. I don't delete anything. I could look it up if there was a phone conversation. Saturday would have been November 30th, right?
November 30th, and he told me it was in the morning, Jeff.
Okay. I don't have a single call on November 30th. I remember him poking his head in.
Okay.
I remember him saying, you're not going to believe this, Broderick complained again. I remember seeing him face to face, and I remember seeing him, he said, when we go talk to his deputy, he turned around and left the office toward there. So it wasn't like I didn't know when he was going. I thought immediately he went there.
Okay.
That's the
What was
portion.
I looking for? Oh, did he come in, right? Did you actually go in?
That's the portion of the testimony that I wish to bring to the attention of the commission for this matter.
Where did you end at with that?
Huh?
What, Mark?
That comes in at approximately, I started approximately 6 minutes and it ended a little bit after 17 minutes. So, based on your Lieutenant Green, based on your investigation, your interviews with the witnesses, and the documents that you reviewed, did you make a recommendation concerning IA 2019-12?
Yes.
And what was that recommendation?
My recommended findings were a sustained complaint for standard of conduct and a sustained complaint for insubordination.
And so you concluded that despite Lieutenant Block's efforts to explain that he thought he was confused about the order or something else, that you found that he had violated a direct order that had been given to him. Is that correct?
Correct.
After IA investigation IA 2019-12, did you conduct another IA investigation with respect to matters concerning Lieutenant Block?
Yes.
And is Exhibit 3 a copy of your report and file concerning IA 2020-01 that you conducted regarding Lieutenant Block?
It is.
And please explain to the Commission what that investigation involved and what that investigation was about.
This investigation was in relation to the investigation that was just discussed, 2019-12. I was detailed by the chief. There was some, due to conversations with the chief, there was some concern that Lieutenant Block may have been untruthful. I was directed to conduct an internal investigation, whether to determine the facts, whether I can conclude that Lieutenant Block was untruthful during my interview with him, recorded interview, which you just heard a portion of in the previous case. Because if he did so, that would be a violation of our policy and procedure manual.
And to conduct your investigation in connection with IA 2020-01, what did you do?
I examined the interview that I conducted with Lieutenant Block in his union representation. I went through it. I determined that there's some very conflicting account of how and what was said to direct Lieutenant Block regarding not working that overtime shift in question. One being what was exactly said, and the second being the setting in which the conversation or the communication took place.
When you talk about setting, are you talking about whether the communication by Captain Tercy with Lieutenant Block took place in person, as Lieutenant Block repeatedly claimed, or by some other method?
That's correct, because in a previous investigation, after Lieutenant Block has said that it was a face-to-face conversation, I re-interviewed Captain Tercy, and he was adamant that it was a phone conversation that he had with him.
And in connection with your investigation of IA 2020-01, did you look at phone records to determine whether Captain Tercy's recollection that the communication with Lieutenant Block took place by phone was accurate?
I did, yes.
And those phone records are attached as part of your report in connection with IA investigation 2020-01, and show that there was a phone call from Captain Tercy's number to Lieutenant Block on Saturday, November 30th?
That's correct.
And did you confirm that Captain Tercy, in fact, did not work on Saturday, November 30th, so he could not possibly have been in the office as Lieutenant Block had claimed to have this in-person statement?
Yeah, I think it's important to mention that the statement regarding the phone call, the front page of the statement lists different sections, and there's a voice section, as you can see, and there's also a messaging section. They're kind of totals for the previous month. If you go down to the bottom of the first page, it starts laying out the dates and times and phone numbers that were contacted from the voice section. It's my understanding that voice is an utterance from the mouth, and there's not talking about messaging. So when I went to the date in question, which was November 30th, at 2:23 p.m., the statement shows that there was an incoming call from what was determined to be Captain Tercey's work cell phone account.
And based on what Captain Tercey said to you in the documents reviewed, did you consider that, did you conclude that Lieutenant Block had been untruthful when he had said to you repeatedly that there was an in-person conversation and that Captain Tercey had turned and walked around to go back to see the deputy chief and did all the other things that Lieutenant Block claimed he did?
This evidence seemed to suggest that it corroborated Captain Tercey's testimony to me and how the communication took place and was in a direct conflict with what Lieutenant Block had testified to.
And when you talked with Captain Tercey about what he communicated to Lieutenant Block, did Captain Tercey indicate to you that he had clearly communicated to Lieutenant Block that he was, that the swap of recall was not permitted and that he was not to work on Sunday?
That's correct.
And did you consider Captain Tercey's statement about that to you to be credible?
Yes.
And is that why you made the recommendation that you did in connection with IA 2020-01?
I made the recommendations based on Captain Tercey's statement and the records from the Department of Verizon account in relation to Lieutenant Block.
And what was that? Is the recommendation set forth in your report, the recommended findings, on page 4 and 5 of IA 2020-01?
I sustained the complaint of truthfulness, section 19.1.3 of our policy and procedure manual, and section 19.1.22, dishonest or untruthfulness, was also sustained.
Thank you, Lieutenant Green. I have no further questions for you at this time, so turning now.
Does any of the commission members have a question for the witness? Yeah, Jim said we could ask questions.
I think it would be appropriate for Lieutenant Block's counsel first to examine the witness, and then if the commission has any questions after that, they're free to ask.
Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Lieutenant Green.
Good afternoon.
Congratulations on your retirement, by the way. Thank you for taking the time to come out today. I just have a couple of questions about things you already testified to, but before I get to that, did you speak with anyone about this case prior to appearing today?
I did.
Okay, who did you speak with?
Attorney Zabel.
And did you discuss what your testimony would be today?
We discussed the subject matter of my testimony, yes.
Okay, but he didn't tell you what to say?
He did not.
You were assigned to conduct internal affairs investigation 2019-12 and 2020-01 by Chief Liddy, correct?
Correct.
And what's been marked as Exhibits 1 and 3, what the two reports you just testified to, they're complete, accurate, objective, and thorough copies of those investigations, are they not?
Yes.
And because your reports are complete, is it fair to say that if something is not documented in either report, then you didn't consider it while reaching your conclusions that the charges were sustained?
Correct.
You were assigned to conduct IA 2019-12 on December 5th of 2019, correct?
Correct.
And how long had you been assigned to professional standards prior to December 5th?
11 months.
Okay. And prior to December 5th, did you receive specialized training on how to conduct internal affairs investigations?
I did.
Where?
It was training conducted by Eric Daigle.
I'm sorry, guys.
Eric Daigle.
Daigle?
And was it sanctioned by Post, the police academy?
I don't know if it was sanctioned by Post or not. I believe it was, but I'm not confident.
How many internal affairs investigations have you done since being assigned to professional standards?
Approximately 18.
Were they all disciplinary in nature?
Yes. When you said, can you rephrase the question? I'm sure what you were asking me there.
I just want to know how many internal affairs investigations you've conducted since being assigned to internal affairs.
Okay. You asked if they were disciplinary in nature?
Yes.
Are you asking me if they all ended up in discipline?
No, I just wanted to know the nature of the investigations. I don't need to know the results.
Okay.
Just a couple questions about Lieutenant Block's schedule before I get to your reports. Are you aware that Lieutenant Block, because he works at an administrative schedule, is permitted to swap a regularly scheduled workday to a regularly scheduled day off one time a week?
Yes.
And are you aware of any written department policies that prohibit an employee from swapping an overtime shift?
Not at this time.
How about,
There was not a policy prohibiting it at that time. There is now.
is it a written policy?
Yes.
When did that go into effect?
One of my recommendations from, I believe it was first investigation, at the end, was it was one of the investigations I made a recommendation that the policy should be clarified, or should be clarified.
No, you did. I remember reading that.
Okay.
Do you know if Lieutenant Block, prior to November 30th, was ever told he was prohibited from swapping an overtime shift?
Prior to
November
30th? I don't know if that was ever communicated to him.
Did you ask him during your interview on December 12th if he was ever told?
I did not. I do know that he had provided information that he had a testimony that he had been allowed to swap recalls in the past.
Yes, and that's where I was going with my next question. You do recall receiving a copy of a text message from Lieutenant Block dated August 11th, 19, whereby Captain Tercey did authorize a recall day swap.
I do.
And that, just for the record, has been marked as Exhibit 6. This is the text message I'm referring to. Are you also aware that entries in the POS scheduling system can be changed retroactively?
I was not aware of that.
So you're also not aware that retroactive changes are commonly made by Lieutenant Block and others?
If I could back up a second, I do know, or did know, that they could be changed retroactively, yes.
And didn't Lieutenant Block request that the POS entry be removed prior to being sent to payroll?
Yes.
And who did he ask?
I believe he sent me an email, which I forwarded to the deputy chief. I was doing an investigation. I didn't want to get involved in that part of it. I believe that the deputy chief communicated, whether it was through me or through Lieutenant Block directly, that it was going to stay.
Right. But isn't it true that Lieutenant Block made the request because if he wasn't entitled to the recall swap because it wasn't permissible, then he didn't want to get paid for it?
That's correct. That was after the initiation of the internal investigation.
Well, actually, are you aware that he had made the request on or about December 3rd, prior to the IA being opened?
I don't recall the exact date. I became aware that he had requested it once I initiated the internal investigation.
Okay. Do you have what's been marked as Exhibit 1 in front of you? It's IA 2019-12.
Yes.
And actually, turn to page 2 at the top. In reference to an email Lieutenant Block sent to Captain Terzi on November 30th, you wrote, quote, that evening, the first full paragraph on the top of the page. That evening, Lieutenant Block sent Captain Terzi an email writing that unless he hears differently, he was going to work the overtime the following day, and if his overtime entry were deleted, he would be there on his own time. Is that what you wrote?
That is,
Okay. That's not what Lieutenant Block wrote in his email, is it? Isn't it true that Lieutenant Block wrote in the email, having heard no more, I'm going in 8 to 4, 08 to 16 tomorrow. If the POS entry gets removed, I'll just be there on my own time, just FYI.
are you talking about the word his and mine?
I'm talking about the disparity between what you wrote and what Block actually said.
I had wrote he would be there on his own time, referring to what Lieutenant Block had communicated, and you just said on my own time. So if that is that what you're saying?
No. What I said, Lieutenant Block had sent the email, and the text of the actual text of the email was, quote, having heard no more, I'm going in, meaning Lieutenant Block is going in. He didn't say he was going to work. 8 to 16 tomorrow. If the POS entry gets removed, I'll just be there on my own time, meaning Lieutenant Block's own time. Just FYI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what Lieutenant Block actually wrote.
Okay.
Would you agree?
Yes, that sounds.
Okay. But that's not what your report states. It's different.
I don't see what you're getting at. What I said in reference to what you just said he wrote, he was going to work the overtime the following day, and if the overtime entry were deleted, he would be there on his own time. I don't understand the difference.
Because Lieutenant Block didn't say he was going to work the overtime the following day in his email message to Captain Tercy. He said he was going in, and that's an important distinction.
Well, I think the distinction is being mischaracterized here. He was going to work. I didn't quote him here. I'm saying this is my wording.
It's your understanding of what he meant in his...
I read his text message, and I'm writing, without quotations, he was going in to work the overtime the following day. That was an overtime shift. So whether we want to call it overtime or reporting to the Fairfield Police Department, that's what he conveyed in that message.
That was your understanding of what he conveyed in the message?
It was my understanding,
okay.
Yes.
That's fine. If you turn to page 5 of your report, you will find that Lieutenant Block sent the email because, and this is in the second full paragraph towards the bottom of the page, you'll find that Lieutenant Block sent this email that I had just referenced because it appears Lieutenant Block understood his actions might result in discipline and the statement would provide a state safeguard.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I just found the location on the page.
Okay. In your report, you gave an opinion that Lieutenant Block sent the email message because it appears that Lieutenant Block understood his actions might result in discipline and the statement would provide a safeguard.
It appeared that way.
Okay. Isn't it true that both Captain Tercy and Lieutenant Block both testified that their conversation on November 30th ended with Captain Tercy saying that he would speak to the chief?
That's correct.
Okay. So it was Lieutenant Block's understanding that Captain Tercy would speak to the chief on November 30th when he was given the directive by Tercy.
Yes, but Captain Tercy testified it wasn't in regards to the order.
Okay, well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
And Captain Tercy told you that he told Lieutenant Block he would speak with the chief about Lieutenant Block's belief that rules are arbitrarily changing just for him.
Correct.
Okay. And Lieutenant Block told you during his testimony that he asked Captain Tercy what rule existed that says he can't swap a recall date, didn't he?
He did.
Okay. So in light of the fact that both Captain Tercy and Lieutenant Block agreed that their conversation ended with Tercy saying he was going to speak with the chief, and both agreed that the conversation with the chief was to be about the rules for Lieutenant Block, the scheduling rules, of which swapping recalls is a part of, isn't it possible that the purpose for Lieutenant Block sending the email wasn't what you stated in your report, but it was because it was Lieutenant Block's understanding that Captain Tercy was going to get back to him about the rule that he could not swap recall days?
Is it possible?
Is it possible that's what Lieutenant Block believed, that Captain Tercy would be getting back to him after he spoke to the chief about the propriety of swapping a recall date, because he had done it in the past. So is it possible?
I don't know what Lieutenant Block was thinking, but what I do know is what Captain Tercy had testified to in two separate interviews regarding this conversation.
Okay, and Lieutenant Block also gave testimony.
He did.
Isn't it true you only interviewed him once?
I did, because in my interview with Lieutenant Block, I wanted to make sure that Captain Tercy hadn't misspoken or made a mistake in his testimony to me. And he testified, his testimony in the second interview was accurate is what he said in the first interview.
Okay, but there was still in your mind a disparity between Captain Tercy's testimony and Lieutenant Block's testimony that you didn't give Lieutenant Block the benefit or the opportunity to clarify through a second interview.
I did not, because I had other evidence that pointed elsewhere.
Okay. You wrote that Captain Tercy stated he previously mistakenly approved the swap when Lieutenant Block requested permission because he did not realize the request related to a recall day. Did you ask Captain Tercy why he thought approving the swap was a mistake?
It's my recollection that Captain Tercy...
I just asked if you asked Captain Tercy why he thought approving the swap was a mistake. Did you ask him the question during your interview?
I believe I did.
And what did he say in response? Because I didn't see that in your report.
Well, I don't put every word of every conversation I have in a report. I put the important facts. And Captain Tercy had communicated to me that it was his understanding when he first approved the swap that it was not, he did not know that it was an overtime shift, but a regular scheduled work day.
I guess what I'm asking you is, you were made aware during the interview on December 12th that Captain Tercy had specifically approved recall swaps in the past for Lieutenant Block, did you not?
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess what I'm getting at is he wrote to D.C. Smith and told you that he thought it was a mistake, and I guess my point is, how could it be a mistake if he's done it in the past? Would that not be disingenuous to call it a mistake?
That's something you could ask Captain Tercy.
But you did the interview.
I did.
And you said it was a complete and thorough interview.
That's my ability.
Okay. Would you agree that if Captain Tercy had not become aware prior to his November 28th approval of Lieutenant Block's recall swap request, then his claim that he mistakenly approved the request would be untruthful?
Can you say that again, please?
So would you agree
Mm-hmm.
that if Captain Tercy had not become aware prior to November 28th, which is the date he approved the recall swap, then his claim that he mistakenly approved the request would be untruthful?
Objection.
Based on?
No,
Based
it's
on?
not relevant to anything but this proceeding. What we're here about is the disciplinary action about Lieutenant Block. Nothing having to do with what Captain Tercy, this witness's conclusion about what Captain Tercy, or characterization of what Captain Tercy said or did.
We are also trying to evaluate the credibility of Captain Tercy, what Lieutenant Green understood it to mean, and a dispute that Lieutenant Block had a much different recollection of the substance of the conversation between Lieutenant Block and Captain Tercy.
I think it's irrelevant, but that's for the chair of admission or the council to decide.
The rules are rather liberal here, and I think that it's not inappropriate to continue this part of the examination. Perfectly fine.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Would you agree that if Captain Tercy had not become aware prior to his November 28th approval of Lieutenant Block's recall swap request, then his claim that he mistakenly approved the request would be untruthful?
It's possible. But my investigation, if I may finish the quote, my answer, my investigation was focused on not whether he was allowed to work recalls in the past or overtime shifts and swapping them out. My investigation, the scope of my investigation was directly related to whether Lieutenant Block violated a direct order.
Right. And wasn't Lieutenant Block's position that there was not clarity in the order, because after the initial order that Captain Tercey gave that he was not to work overtime, there was a dialogue between Lieutenant Block and Captain Tercey, whereby Lieutenant Block was under the impression that the order was quote-unquote put on hold. Isn't that accurate?
That's what Lieutenant Block testified to, yes.
Right. So essentially what you're telling me is that, strike that. Okay. Let's talk about your next IA, 2020-01. You have that report in front of you?
I do.
It's been marked as Exhibit 3. Actually, one more question about your other report. When you interviewed Captain Tercey, he told you that the telephone call to Lieutenant Block on November 30th was made before noon.
That was the best of his recollection. Yes, that's correct.
But that's factually inaccurate, is it not?
That's correct. It was
Okay.
After 2 p.m.
Okay, moving to 2020-01, you concluded in this investigation that Lieutenant Block was in violation of policy 19.1.3, truthfulness, and policy 19.1.22, dishonest or untruthfulness, because you saw 2 areas of inconsistent testimony between Captain Tercey and Lieutenant Block. Specifically, the setting of the conversation and the subject matter of the conversation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about the setting for a moment. With respect to the setting of the conversation, you rely on the fact that Lieutenant Block claimed he did not receive a call from Captain Tercey on November 30th because the cell phone record evidence clearly shows that he did, correct?
Did you say September 30th?
November 30th.
Can you repeat the question, please?
With respect to the setting of the conversation, you rely on the fact that Lieutenant Block claimed he did not receive a call from Captain Tercey on November 30th because the cell phone record evidence clearly shows that he did receive that call. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you also noted in your report that Lieutenant Block, around the 15-minute and 55-second mark, said, I remember him seeing face-to-face. I can look it up. I don't delete anything. I don't have a single call on November 30th.
Correct.
And that sort of supported your belief that, again, it was not truthful.
That's correct.
Okay. Are you aware that Lieutenant Block uses an iPhone?
I don't know what kind of phone he used.
Okay, you don't recall because he handed it to you during the December 12th?
I didn't inspect it for what the brand was.
Okay. Do you use an iPhone?
I do use an iPhone.
Okay. So you're familiar with the features of the iPhone?
Correct.
Okay. And because you're familiar with the iPhone's features, you're aware that under the iPhone's recent call tab, it has an all and a missed calls tab?
Yes.
Okay. Lieutenant, isn't it possible that Lieutenant Block was looking at the missed call tab when he represented to you that he didn't have a single call on November 30th? And not the all calls tab?
Anything's possible.
Okay. And if that was the case, then the call from Captain Tercey would not have appeared on the missed calls tab because it wasn't a missed call.
If that was the case.
Isn't it possible that if Lieutenant Block was re-interviewed as part of your investigation, you may have learned at the time that Lieutenant Block was not being untruthful, but instead made an inadvertent misstatement because he was looking at the wrong tab?
At some point, the interviews have to stop. We don't keep going back and forth. And I had conflicting statements between Captain Tercey's account, what happened, and Lieutenant Block's. When I investigated whether Lieutenant Block was untruthful during my interview with him, I had the testimony of Captain Tercey, my re-interview with Captain Tercey. I had Lieutenant Block's testimony, and then I had the cell phone records.
Okay, but this is a second investigation that was launched well after your investigation into 2019-12. The second investigation into untruthfulness asserted all new charges. So you conducted an investigation essentially using the information from 2019-12. did you interview anyone whatsoever, or whomsoever, with respect to 2020-01?
I did not, but I would like, the beginning of my report.
Your attorney can speak to, ask you follow-up questions, but you answered
He's allowed to complete his answer.
Pardon me?
He's allowed to complete his answer.
Sure.
On page 1 of my report for 2020-01, after the complaint, abstract of the allegation, application of rules, and such a way, you can see before the report, at the bottom of there, and when the report starts, I have a note to the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And that directs the reader of this report to read that report prior to reading this report.
Let me ask you this. You conducted the first investigation, 2019-12. You had all the same facts.
Correct.
You didn't realize at the time you gave your conclusions in the first IA that there was a potential issue of untruthfulness or dishonesty?
Can you repeat the question?
I'm saying when you gave your summary of your charges and what was violated in your first investigation, you only found a violation of insubordination and the violation of the standard of conduct, correct?
That's correct.
All the same information was available to you at that time to determine whether or not other departmental policies had been violated, correct?
That's correct. I didn't have the cell phone records at that time.
Okay. But you still had the testimony.
I did.
And as part of internal affairs, I would assume that it's your obligation to be familiar with all the rules and regulations so that you can investigate them thoroughly.
Mm-hmm.
And you had testified that this was a thorough and complete report, so what I'm asking you is why didn't you see other policy violations in your first investigation?
I did not have the cell phone records at that time. I don't know that I would be comfortable when you have conflicting testimony from two parties charging him with untruthfulness without some more evidence.
Okay, so you said you required more evidence, which are the cell phone records. So wouldn't it have been...
I didn't say it required. I said I personally have to feel good if I'm confident, if I'm bringing charges up against another employee of the Fairfield Police Department, and without further evidence, I wouldn't be comfortable doing that at that time.
Okay. But you were comfortable not giving Lieutenant Block an opportunity to explain the inconsistencies that you found in the report after you did the first investigation?
I had the information. I had the recording, I had the cell phone records, I had the testimony of both parties.
Did you have a recording from Captain Tercy?
No.
You didn't record your interview with Captain Tercy?
I did not.
And again, I think I asked you this. The call Captain Tercy made by Lieutenant Block was at 2:23 in the afternoon, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And Captain Tercy said it was before noon. Do you
Correct.
think Captain Tercy was being untruthful or that he just made a mistake?
I believe his recollection he may have made a mistake. He had told me in the first interview that he didn't specifically remember when that conversation took place, but he thought that it was before noon.
Right. And isn't it true that Lieutenant Block also made multiple representations to you throughout the course of your December 12th interview that he also didn't have a specific recollection of a lot of the facts and circumstances and dates?
He did.
Okay. But do you know if Lieutenant Block has ever been untruthful in the past?
I don't know.
As part of your investigation, do you look at prior disciplinary records?
Yes.
Did you find any sustained charges of truthfulness for Lieutenant Block in this investigation?
I don't recall that I found any untruthfulness.
But we could assume, because we had asked questions earlier about your report being thorough, that if you had found prior instances of discipline, you would have included them in your report. Is that accurate?
For untruthfulness?
Yes.
Yes.
And so we could assume that there is no prior history of untruthfulness for Lieutenant Block because it's on your report.
That's correct.
Okay. And so Lieutenant Block has no prior issues with truthfulness, yet...
Not that I know. No.
Right. Yet you give Captain Tercy recollection of greater weight than Lieutenant Block's.
Captain Tercy's testimony has cell phone records go with.
But just to be clear,
If those cell phone records are accurate, that,
no, I'm not disputing that they're accurate, or whether they're accurate or not. But also, Lieutenant Block prefaced his answer, if I recall correctly, at the December 12th interview, that he didn't remember specifically the day of the call. Did he not?
he did at the beginning of the interview,
Okay,
yes.
I'll move on. The second thing you had a concern with was the subject matter of the conversation between Captain Tercy and Lieutenant Block. Is that accurate?
I didn't hear all of that question.
I'm sorry. You also had a concern with the subject matter of the conversation between Captain Tercy and Lieutenant Block, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And you wrote, I believe on page 3, quote, "It is not reasonable to believe that Captain Tercy would contact Lieutenant Block and prohibit him from working a scheduled overtime shift the following day without providing the reason for the decision."
Where on the page are you?
Page 3, under your discussions and conclusions. It's the second sentence.
Okay. I'm oriented on the page. Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, I just pointed out that you wrote that it is not reasonable to believe that Captain Tercy would contact Lieutenant Block and prohibit him from working a scheduled overtime shift the following day without providing the reason for the decision.
Correct.
See that?
Right, yes.
Okay. And isn't it true that Lieutenant Block expressly told you that he did not remember Captain Tercy explaining the reason why Lieutenant Block could not work?
Correct.
And then in your report on page 3 at the top, you included the relevant questions about if Captain Tercy, received an order from the deputy chief, and then Lieutenant Block's response, he didn't remember him explaining, and then you said you don't remember swapping recalls. He didn't give you an explanation as to why you couldn't work, and Lieutenant Block's answer was no, correct?
That's correct.
All right. After Lieutenant Block responded with a no, isn't it true that he followed up to explain what he meant during the interview, around the 12:22 mark?
Yes, that's just a small excerpt from an interview.
Right. So, in fact, this doesn't paint the entire picture of what Lieutenant Block told you during the interview. In fact, and I could read what actually the interview says, or you can play it back, but Lieutenant Block responded, after you asked him, you don't remember him giving explanation why you couldn't work. Lieutenant Block says no, and then he continues, no, because that's why I brought it up to Tercy's attention, that I remember thinking he doesn't realize I swapped. So he did have a conversation, at least with Captain Tercy, that there was an issue with the recall block and recall swap, and he believed that Lieutenant Tercy didn't realize that it was a swap and it was just creating his own overtime.
I think a reasonable person would conclude that if they expected to work an overtime shift and were being told by the direct supervisor they could not, discussion would occur as to why they could not.
I completely agree with you, had there not been a follow-up conversation between the two men, at least what Lieutenant Block recalled the conversation went, and how it went. Now, in support of that, you were provided with do you have Exhibit 5 in front of you?
I do not.
Can we have Exhibit 5? Can you just read that over? Do you recognize that?
No, I'm going to read it first. I do recognize.
And you've seen that as part of your investigation?
I became aware of this in my meeting with Attorney Zabel. I don't, just make sure I'm not getting this confused with another text message.
Do you recall Lieutenant Block handing that to you at the December 12th meeting interview?
I don't, but if you two witnessed that he did, I'm not going to dispute.
I'm asking if you remembered seeing it.
I have seen it, yes.
Did you see it prior to writing your report?
I don't recall if I've seen this. I mean, there was a lot of text messages back and forth that were provided.
Okay.
I did see this. At what point I reviewed this, I don't recall.
Okay. That's your notes.
If I could take a second, I'd like to read this.
Sure.
I want to make sure I don't make a mistake here. I don't believe I saw this text message until after my investigation was concluded. That's the best of my recollection.
Okay. Well, you're a trained investigator. On the first column, Lieutenant Block writes to Captain Tercey, any feedback from within? And that was the day after the recall swap that he worked on Sunday. In the text that followed, wouldn't that text feed suggest to you that Lieutenant Block did in fact had a conversation and was expecting a call back from Captain Tercey with respect to working the recall swap, or the propriety of working the recall swap?
It's possible, but it's also possible he's following up on his complaint that Lieutenant Bodrick continuously files complaints against him and the rules are arbitrarily changed, and that Captain Tercey told him that I will follow up with the chief and get back to you.
Okay. Well, if you read on, Captain Tercey says, I spoke to both chiefs. They said they understood. Chris, meaning Chief Liddy, was absolutely fine with it. So Chief Liddy was absolutely fine with Broderick making complaints against Block and Block feeling singled out. Does that make sense to you?
I don't know. I could read this like the commissioners and anyone can, and we could probably come up with multiple theories of what's being communicated here.
Well, I guess my point is, had you given Lieutenant Block an opportunity to be interviewed for the untruthfulness, this would have come out, and this actually supports Lieutenant Block's position that he was awaiting a response from Captain Tercey, as does his email on November 30th at 10:09, where he says, having heard no more. Does it not?
This text, and I'm looking for the date, it's the day following.
December 2nd.
December 2nd, so it's after the recall.
The day after is a Monday.
Correct. So it's the day the recall or the overtime shift in question had already been worked.
Mm-hmm.
So whether he could work it or not, or whether he can go to the Fairfield Police Department and be in his office at that time, he was directed not to do that, and it was done. So I don't understand this text message or the questioning of what's in this text message is referring to whether it was a question whether he could still go in or not, or maybe I'm misunderstanding his question.
Well, what I'm trying to establish is that Lieutenant Block told you during the December 12th interview that he sent the email at 10 o'clock at night to preserve his right to the entitlement had he learned that it was appropriate for him to do the recall swap, correct?
Correct.
All right, so he sent the email. So he was preserving his right to work, because if he just didn't go in, he would have lost it, right? So what I'm saying, and you understand.
Directed not to go in.
Hold on. You're assuming that Lieutenant Block and Captain Tercey didn't have the conversation about his ability to swap a recall that Lieutenant Block understood. You're essentially relying on Captain Tercey's testimony to make that statement. Because Lieutenant Block says something different. And this supports Lieutenant Block's, this as well as the November 30th, 10 p.m. email supports his assertion that there was a conversation, that there was some confusion with respect to the specificity of Captain Tercey's order. Does it not?
There's multiple subjects that were being discussed between Captain Tercey, it's my understanding, between Captain Tercey and Lieutenant Block. One was the recall. 2 was directive that he could not work the recall. I'm sorry, 1 was that he could not work the recall Sunday. 2 was that he's no longer allowed to swap recalls. And the, I just lost my train of thought, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Okay.
Oh, I remember the third. The third was that the subject had been brought up in the conversation, according to both parties, Lieutenant Block and Captain Tercy, that Lieutenant Block, it was his feeling that rules were arbitrarily being changed just for him. And Captain Tercy had communicated to me that he had told Lieutenant Block that he would follow up or bring that concern up to the chief.
I'm glad you said that, because I was just going to ask you about that, because the rules he was complaining about were the overtime rules, the scheduling orders that had been modified by Captain Tercy. So, were you aware of the modified scheduling orders that Captain Tercy issued to Lieutenant Block?
Yes, I'm aware that they occurred. I don't specifically recall them.
Okay. And the scheduling orders that were issued by Captain Tercy to Lieutenant Block concerned, or at least part of them, spoke to swaps, or referred to swaps. Do you have, let me get you Exhibit 13, refresh your recollection. Take a second to do that over to us.
I don't believe I've seen this document, if that's the question.
No, I was just seeing it, because you had mentioned that you were aware that there were orders.
Yeah, I had heard.
Okay, no problem. I'll speak to Captain Tercy about this. I have nothing further.
I'm sorry.
I think we're all set. I don't have any. I think that's fine. At least I don't have any reason. If the commission has any questions.
Just trying to get some clarity. Mr.
Manamite.
Said that you had trained from, you said you had to train from Eric Daigle, who's that?
Yeah. Eric Daigle owns a law firm, and he does, it's my understanding that he does training for police officers. He also does he does training, consulting, and research for police officers and police departments nationally.
Another question. Besides IE, do you have any investigative background?
I do. Sure. I worked as a patrol officer until 1999 when I was promoted to detective. I worked as a detective in the investigation division for approximately 3 years until I was promoted to sergeant, and I worked as a detective supervisor for 10 years between the time I made detective and before being promoted to lieutenant.
Okay, just have one other question about clarity. Lieutenant Block was given a direct order not to work the overtime. He was given an order that he could work the overtime?
I'm not aware of any evidence or testimony that says that he was told he could work the overtime, with the exception of Captain Thursey's testimony on when he told me his initial conversation when Lieutenant Block had requested to swap that shift, that Lieutenant Thursey, after being contacted, that it was Captain Thursey's understanding he did not know it was an overtime shift. He thought it was a regular work shift, and that when he was directed, when it was brought to his attention by the deputy chief that it's a recall and he's not allowed to work it, he said he was directed by the deputy chief to tell him, Lieutenant Block, that he can't swap recalls and he's not to work Sunday, December 1st.
Okay, so the last order was he cannot work the overtime. And how much money are we talking about for this shift? Lieutenant's overtime?
Approximately $90 an hour.
8 hours?
For 8 hours, correct.
Okay, and he put in for the overtime?
He did. If I could clarify that, because he initially put the overtime in for the day he was scheduled to work it. And according to Lieutenant Block's testimony to me, once he requested from Captain Thursey if he could swap the shift, he went into the electronic scheduling system and dragged that overtime from the previous, I believe it was a Friday, to the Sunday, December 1st, which is the day in question regarding this recall in question. So that's how he entered it. He initially entered it on another day and then dragged it over to Sunday, December 1st.
But he never was given any counter orders to work the overtime. His last order was he cannot work the overtime. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's how I understand it from the testimony and the evidence.
I just have a quick question. Millington back here.
Okay, sure.
So just so I can understand this, so he's, like, I obviously know what a swap is, but this was a swap of an overtime, so he was offered overtime on Friday, and instead of working overtime on Friday, he wanted to work that same overtime for whatever that assignment was on Sunday.
Yes. His Lieutenant Block's schedule at the time had 2 weekdays. I believe his schedule mirrored mine. And what that, at my schedule at the time, and what that does is within those weekdays, because we did have the time have to work one Saturday a month. There were 2 weekdays a month, one being a Wednesday and one being a Friday, where if it was okay, at the discretion of the chief of police, who can cancel that any time due to budgetary concerns, you can come in and work that day. So I believe the day in question is Friday, that he would have been able, unless directed otherwise by the chief, to work that shift without permission. And the problem became...
Sorry, you said he's allowed to do it without permission, twice a month.
Twice a month, unless directed otherwise by command staff personnel. A Wednesday and a Friday. Now, the problem here became when I said our schedules mirrored. I never swapped a recall. It's regardless. But the problem here became when he took that recall and dragged it to Sunday, because apparently he wanted to work for whatever reason on Sunday rather than Friday.
So did somebody else work that Friday shift, or the Friday shift never got worked by anybody? And
it never got, it's my understanding that it never got worked.
And that Friday shift was one of his 2 allowable, without permission, overtime?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I got it.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of weird, but I mean, that overtime is only for people that have sole responsibilities like IT, because you can't have a patrol opening.
That's correct.
Overtime and say, I'd like to work, I mean, people would probably love it, but I'd take my Saturday, I'll work Tuesday. So,
That's correct.
It's just for employees working an administrative schedule, such as Lieutenant Block and Lieutenant
Yeah.
Green.
and had up until the time that they changed the policy, were to your knowledge, other administrators swapping their overtime shifts?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
But it had been done before, or?
It had been done, from what I know, by Lieutenant Block.
So he had done it before?
He had done it before.
Okay.
Shelley, did you have a question?
Well, it partially answered it, but by him switching from Friday to Sunday, was that allowed? Was that allowed? Or should he have gotten a supervisor or a deputy chief to, I want to ask a question that he answered, but by switching it, could you just do it automatically? Or do you need someone to confirm that you have to switch it? It's an allowable day. Maybe that's where I was going.
Right. So to answer your question, it's my understanding in the electronic system that only supervisors can make those changes, that a line officer or detective cannot do it without the authorization of a supervisor. That's my understanding of it.
Okay, so that should have been confirmed, correct?
Confirmed?
In other words, switching from the Friday to Sunday, even though you thought it was allowed, and then it was not, it should have been confirmed, and it was not. Is that correct?
It was confirmed initially by Captain Tercy.
Right, but then it was stopped,
That's correct.
and it was never confirmed. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Peter, did you have a question? No. Okay.
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure who to direct them to, but let me give it a shot. I just want to clarify a couple basic concepts I may have missed along the way. So the overtime that the Commissioner Pine mentioned, the $750 or whatever, that money was or was not paid?
It's my understanding it was paid.
So the overtime, forgetting everything else, the money was paid?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And the directive to not work, I just want to be clear that I understand the means that directive was conveyed. I've heard it a few times, I just want to make sure I understand. Commissioner Pine talked about that being the last directive, right, to not work the Sunday. Help me understand who delivered that message.
Captain Tercy.
Captain Tercy?
At the direction of the deputy chief.
Was that part of the 7-minute phone call, or was that part of some other community? I just want to understand how it was communicated.
It's Captain Tercy's testimony to me that that message, because both were not working in their capacity in their offices, it was a Saturday, that message was delivered via a phone call.
That's part of the 7-minute phone call to whatever.
That's what the evidence seems to suggest.
That's fine, okay. And the other thing that is confusing to me is I've heard a couple times, it was early on, you guys were talking about working versus coming in. And I'm not sure what that meant. Is there a difference between working and coming in, or I was just there but I wasn't working, I'm here? I didn't catch that.
Lieutenant Block will be giving testimony to explain what he meant by that, if that helps.
Pardon me?
I said Lieutenant Block will be giving testimony on that specific point to help clarify
Okay,
things.
I can save that question for him.
Yes.
Sure, that's fine. I just didn't understand the concept, if it was technical or if it was just nuance.
No, and he'll explain the reason why that distinction is so important, coming in versus work.
Okay.
And the town's position, of course, that if an employee...
It's hard to hear you, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm sorry. If it is, as shown in the records here, including the email records by Deputy Chief Smith, it is the town's position that when an employee comes in or works or comes in and performs work, they are required to be paid for that service. You can't come in and volunteer and not get paid. Once you show up and you do the work, as a matter of law, if you don't pay the wages for the work performed, you violated the wage statutes. So you're required to pay somebody. They come into work, they can't say, well, gee, I'm just here as a volunteer. That's the town's position.
I understand that. That's a fair labor standards question. That wasn't my question.
Okay.
My question was, why was it being used and what does the terminal,
Okay.
what does it mean? It sounds like, well, we can wait for that.
Actually, I just have one follow-up question on POS system for Lieutenant Green. Lieutenant, I'm sorry.
I wasn't here.
Oh, I apologize.
I'm not quite finished. The other thing is, and this is kind of and I'm not sure how to ask this without offending anyone, but I'm going to ask you, Lieutenant Green. You know, there was some discussion earlier about credibility, I guess, would be, and you know, who knows, right? Credibility is believability, whatever word you want to use. But, you know, I've heard two things that touched on that vein. One was, you know, did the call happen at 2 or 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock? You know, how credible or not is that answer that was proven to be slightly off? Or if you compare that to the other credibility type issue that came up, you know, I met somebody in person versus I met them on the phone. You know, they were in the hall. Can you just touch a little bit on those two topics and what they meant to you or what they meant to your investigation?
Sure.
I mean, there are different levels of, at least in my mind, they appear to be different levels of instances where somebody could be off a hair.
And we're talking about material facts here.
Credible.
Yeah, and these are material facts. Whether Lieutenant Block testimony is accurate or Captain Tercey's testimony is accurate regarding how the conversation took place,
right,
and what was said is a material fact to this investigation. Because it could change things if there was evidence to support Lieutenant Block's testimony. The fact of how the conversation took place and what was said is the basis for this entire investigation.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. It's critical.
Right, thanks. I'm good, sir.
Okay, thank you. Lieutenant, with respect to the POS system, isn't it true that Lieutenant Block was allowed to swap one time per week?
I do know that he was allowed to swap. I don't know the parameters specifically of what was allowed and how many times, but yes, he was allowed to swap.
So, we're going to run by it. Let's assume Lieutenant Block, well, let's not assume, Lieutenant Block told you that he felt Captain Tercey was going to get back to him to check on the appropriateness of swapping the recall. That was his testimony, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in support of that testimony, Lieutenant Block sent the email on the 30th, and also there's a text exchange on December 2nd, right?
Correct.
Which, according to Lieutenant Block, supports his position that he was, in fact, waiting for a reply from Captain Tercey, correct? It supports Lieutenant Block's position that he was waiting for a reply.
Yes, but the subject matter of what
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
So let's assume he's not able to work the recall swap.
Okay.
All right, after the fact. Because you can modify POS entries retroactively, couldn't Lieutenant Block have taken, say, his regularly scheduled Monday shift and swap it to Sunday and get paid for the day anyway? Because you can make changes retroactively. It's been done.
He can, yes. If we're talking about a regular, are you asking a regular shift?
No, what I'm saying is because Lieutenant Block works Sunday, and at least in his mind, he was waiting for confirmation whether he could or could not work that day as a recall swap day. Let's assume on Monday, he finds out from Captain Tercey, nope, the DC says absolutely not, you can't work a recall swap. My question is, once he hears that, he could have swapped his Tuesday to Sunday, gotten paid and been in compliance with the FLSA and Connecticut's Department of Labor because he's still getting paid, and it wouldn't have violated anything. Isn't that true?
Yeah, you said a Tuesday to Sunday?
And any day his regular scheduled work day.
Okay.
If he, after the fact, he could, and that would have been permissible. It's a regular work day.
I don't know if it would be permissible. Did he have the ability to do that through POS? Yes.
Okay, so he could have changed the entry from a recall swap to just a regular swap after the fact.
That's possible through the system, yes.
Yes. Okay. And he told you during your interview that he attempted to have that recall swap removed through you and through others, did he not?
Yes.
That's all I have.
I've got a follow-up
Can I finish the question?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Finish my answer, I'm sorry. Yeah, he requested it after the command staff became aware that he did it, worked it, or was at the Fairfield Police Department in a time that he was told not to be here.
Correct. So that was my question. None of what has been raised by Attorney Manamite in response to all of this question has anything to do with the fact that Lieutenant Block ignored the direct order not to come in and work that day, correct?
Correct.
No further questions.
That's all I have.
Any other questions for the witness? We're excused.
I can't hear you, sir.
No, we're excused.
Thank you.
Captain Hersey, is the next witness?
Should
Should we take a 5-minute break? Run down the hall?
Commission.
5-minute break?
Sure, 5-minute break. I'm not sure.
Dave, should I leave?
Carry that on.
Yeah, please, I'll put it back.
Who's the next witness?
Captain Hersey.
Okay.
Ready to swear?
Pardon me?
Are you ready for me to swear him in?
Yes, we are.
Would you raise your right hand, please? You solemnly swear testimony about the given and answering questions shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Would you state your name and address, please, for the record?
Captain Christopher Tersey, 100 Reef Road, Fairfield, Connecticut.
Good afternoon. I was going to say, no, good evening, Captain Hersey.
Good evening.
Would you describe for the commission your current position, duties, and responsibilities?
Currently, I'm a captain. I'm the commander of the Special Services Division and have been there since I was transferred there January 15th of this year. Responsibilities include traffic, accident reconstruction, supervision, marine unit, animal control, and building maintenance right now, as well as building maintenance and ECC, Communication Center.
And how long have you been employed with the Fairfield Police Department?
Since March 1st, 1999.
And in connection with your duties and responsibilities as a captain in the Fairfield Police Department, did you have a discussion with Lieutenant Block on November 30 last year?
I did.
Can you please describe for the commission, how that came to be?
Before I was transferred, and I was the administrative captain, which used to be called the Support Services Bureau, under which Lieutenant Block was under my command.
And did you have a discussion with Lieutenant Block on November 30 last year?
Yes, I did.
Did that discussion take place in person? We'll strike that. Were you here when the recording of Lieutenant Block's interview was played?
Yes, sir.
For the commission? And you heard Lieutenant Block describe a meeting with you in which he repeatedly said 6 or 7 or 8 times that he had a meeting with you in person on November 30th, that he described that meeting. Did you hear that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did any of that happen?
No.
Okay. Please describe for the commission what your communication was with on November 30th, 2019 with Lieutenant Block.
It was a phone call. It was not a text. It was a regular voice phone call in which I instructed him that I was given orders from Deputy Chief Smith that he was not to work swap and work a recall the next day, which was Sunday.
Okay, and did you convey the orders that you just described to Lieutenant Block to him on November 30th as clearly as you just did it here today?
Initially, yes.
Okay, and when you say initially yes, what do you mean by that?
Lieutenant Block asked me follow-up questions, including what policy was being violated. He also asked, I think he asked how it was found out. Not implying he was doing something wrong, implying that how did the deputy chief know the entry was made into the POS schedule.
Did anything in your conversation after Lieutenant Block asked those questions, did you say anything to him to tell him that the order was not to work was suspended in any way?
No.
Okay. What did you tell him in response to these questions?
I had told him that Lieutenant Broderick had brought forward the complaint or the issue to the deputy chief. The deputy chief in turn contacted me last night, which would have been a Friday evening, either Friday afternoon or Friday evening, and I was instructed that he could not swap and work the recall.
Okay. I'm going to show you some exhibits that are exhibits 4 and 5. There's some emails that have been talked about here today.
I'm just going to take a look at those.
Direct your attention first to Exhibit 4. That's a text exchange, not an email. If I said email, I misspoke. That's a text exchange that occurred on November 30th.
That's correct.
And that's between you and Lieutenant Block?
That's correct.
You see that? When you responded, Roger, that we'll have that conversation, what did you understand Lieutenant Block to be inquiring about in this text message, and what were you responding to?
Lieutenant Block was saying that he was going to avail himself of Brenda Kupchak, the new First Select Woman's open door policy, as it says there. He felt that the rules were being changed. I believe the word was, I don't know if it says it in there, but I know he said the word arbitrary or arbitrarily to me. Actually, it does say that in there. And I said, Roger, that meaning understood, and I'll bring that up to the chief.
Okay. And again, when you spoke with Lieutenant Block, when you actually spoke with him that day and he raised those concerns, did you indicate to him in any way that the order not to work was suspended until you could bring up his concerns with the deputy chief or the chief?
No. I did say I would bring up his concerns with the chief, but I never relayed the order.
Direct your attention to Exhibit 5, which is another set of text exchanges that occurred on December 2. See that? Well, actually...
I'm sorry, this is December 2. I don't see the date.
Okay. I think it's stipulated that the Exhibit 5 was a text exchange that occurred on December 2.
It does say Monday on there.
Monday, December 2?
Yes.
Is that right, Chris?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Chris, wrong person.
I guess.
Actually, before we get there, I think it's in Exhibit 1. There is an email dated November 30 to you from Jeff Block. Did you see that?
Yes.
When did you get that email?
It says 10:09 p.m. on Saturday. I do remember reading it the next day, Sunday.
Okay. Did you ever respond to this email?
I did not. It was an interesting form of communication as well.
What do you mean by that?
Lieutenant Block and I would say 99% of the time, always communicated via text, including that day.
Okay.
And so,
was there anything that prevented, to your knowledge, was there anything that prevented Lieutenant Block from communicating with you by text at any time on November 30th or December 1 or December 2?
No, I always, just part of the job, I would have my phone by the bed. I don't have the email alerts on, but if it's a text or a phone call, I'll wake up and check it and see if there's anything I'm needed at.
Okay. Now, going back to Exhibit 5, you see that there's another series of text exchanges on that day.
Yes.
And that's between you and Lieutenant Block. And again, will you please explain to the commission what this text exchange was about, at least from what you understood it to be?
It started off, regular responsibilities related. I asked if he was working. He said SHU, which means he was working at Sacred Heart on an outside detail. I believe, my memory is that we were having a storm that day, we're coming up, so I asked him to check on ECC, make sure they're good with staffing. He said, sure, no problem. And then he said, am I supposed to go through this?
Yeah.
FYI, I contacted the attorney about Broderick's failure to represent. To clarify that, Jeff had always believed that Keith did not represent him fairly. I said, okay, nice, don't blame you. Any feedback from within? I spoke to both chiefs. They said they understood. This is my word. Chris, meaning Chief Liddy, was fine with it.
And so please explain what you meant by that.
I meant that he was availing himself of first select woman's open door policy, and which I did report to that first thing Monday morning when the chief came into work. And he goes,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
On Monday morning, when the chief came into work, I did report to him what Lieutenant Block had said about availing himself of First Select Woman Kupchak's open door policy, and I believe the chief's response to me was, okay, so be it, I'm good with that.
And then you say Don was fine, he maintained that recall to discretionary. Please explain what that.
So Jeff, the other thing I brought up was that the rules and the rules specifically for recalls, which means overtime on your day off, was being arbitrarily assigned to him. And I said, Don, the deputy chief, was fine. He's just reiterating that the off-duty days are not mandated. It's not a contractual item. So I think you had asked about the days off, or Jamie, you asked about the rotation. Commissioner, the days off with the rotation. For an administrative schedule, they're offered 2 recalls, 2 overtime times a month. And the reason they have those days off is because they work more hours than the patrol officers work. So to equal them out with the other members of the department, they're given days off, and they have the opportunity to continue their workload on those days if they choose. That's at the discretion of the chief for any division. Traditionally, he allows it if there's work to be done.
Okay, and so this email exchange had nothing to do with the fact of whether or not he was ordered not to work. This was a follow-up regarding his assertion to you that he was being arbitrarily picked up.
Yes, that was the word. And if you follow up on the page 2 or the middle section, my writing is in gray if the commissioners are looking at it. Lieutenant Block's in blue. And he said, not sure how to take that. I said, and this is so I explained myself, meaning he said no one was picking on you, that we don't swap overtime. I said it may have not usually been done, but there's nothing that says you can't, because Jeff had asked if he had a policy violation.
Okay, and I think there was some questioning about whether or not Lieutenant Block could swap regular time for the time on Sunday. Do you recall that questioning by Attorney Manamite?
Yes.
Okay. Did Lieutenant Block raise that issue with you at any time?
No. The only, other than the overtime, the only thing he raised with me is that the email said he would come in on his own time if it was not accepted. He never said he was going to swap in a regular day.
Okay. Now, is there any doubt in your mind that you clearly communicated to Lieutenant Block on November 30th that he was not to work on Sunday, December 1?
No, I do specifically recall when Lieutenant Block brought up the arbitrary. I said, I get it, I understand your feelings, but my orders from the deputy chief are you can't work the recall.
No further questions.
Hello, Captain. Thanks for coming tonight. Just have a couple follow-up questions. You said you've been employed by the Fairfield Police Department since March 1999, correct?
Correct.
So,
21 years.
Long time. And you've known Lieutenant Block since you've been hired?
Correct.
Okay. And how long have you been a supervisor?
2006, I believe I was promoted to sergeant.
And how long were you Lieutenant Block supervisor?
1 year.
Okay, and that's since January 15th of 19 when you were promoted to captain?
Correct. It would have been January 15th to January 14th the following year. When I was transferred to Special Services.
Okay. And so you said you've known Lieutenant Block for 22 years. So is it fair to say that you know him fairly well?
Fair to say. Okay. At least work-wise, not personally.
In all the time that you have known Lieutenant Block prior to December 1, 2019, has he ever been untruthful with you?
No.
Has he ever disobeyed an order you gave?
No.
Has he ever refused to do anything that you asked him to do?
No.
Do you consider Lieutenant Block to be the type of individual who would lie, cheat, or steal?
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
Do you think Lieutenant Block is the type of an individual who would lie, cheat, or steal?
No.
Okay. And that's just some questions about the events leading up to December 1st. On November 28th, you received a text from Lieutenant Block wherein he requested to swap his Friday to Sunday, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And you told him to go for it, meaning you approved his request?
Yes, sir.
And were you aware that the swap was thereafter entered into POPs?
No. I can assume that Lieutenant Block did it, but I never checked.
Okay. Now, a couple days later, on November 29th, you had a conversation with the deputy chief, and he told you that the swapping of a recall day was not allowed, correct?
I believe it was the next day. So this all occurred on, I remember it being Thanksgiving, and I believe the next day, which was Friday, is when the deputy chief told me about this. And then
Right, the 29th was Friday.
Okay, Friday.
Okay. Oh, your recollection's accurate. And he told you that the swapping of a recall day was not allowed?
Correct.
All right. And prior to November 29th, prior to that conversation with the deputy chief, were you aware of any written rules or regulations or policies that prohibited the swapping of recall days?
No.
Okay. And prior to November 29th, did anyone from the administration tell you that swapping recall days was not allowed?
No.
Yes, in your capacity as a captain, are you provided with recall days?
No.
When you were a lieutenant in internal affairs, your most recent assignment before being promoted, did you work an administrative schedule which entitled you to recall days?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever swap your recall days?
Yes.
How often?
3 or 4 times. Maybe ever.
Okay. Prior to November 29th, did you think employees working an administrative schedule, all employees were able to work recall days?
Were they able to?
Yeah, prior to
the chief could say no at the discretion of the chief because they know more overtime, but yes, they're authorized.
And at any point in time, did the chief ever say no more overtime for recall days?
Yes.
At some point during your meeting with Deputy Chief Smith, he ordered you to tell Lieutenant Block that he could not swap recall days and was not to get overtime on Sunday, if I heard your testimony correctly.
That's correct. That was, if you consider it a meeting, it was a conversation over the phone.
Okay. Thereafter, on November 30th, you called Lieutenant Block to relay this directive from Deputy Chief Smith.
Correct.
All right. Why didn't you notify Lieutenant Block on November 29th when you first got the order?
I don't remember. I might have been doing a family thing that night. It didn't seem like it was an emergency. I'd have to go back and check my schedule.
Were you aware that Lieutenant Block had worked a midnight to 6 a.m. overtime assignment on November 30th?
I am now. I was not then.
Okay. Were you aware that your phone call may have woken him up?
I was not. I was not aware.
During this telephone conversation with Lieutenant Block, the two of you spoke about how Lieutenant Block felt that the administration was enforcing policies against him that didn't exist, correct?
Correct.
That was during the telephone conversation,
Yes.
just so we're clear. And the policies that Lieutenant Block were referring to were the 2 scheduling orders that the chief, through you, issued to Lieutenant Block.
Yes.
Okay. And are the scheduling orders? I'll show you what's been marked as
Team.
so marked as Exhibit 12 and 13. Do you recognize those?
I do.
And you authored them, correct?
I authored the first one. The second was authored by Chief Liddy.
Okay. And would you just explain to the commission what these are?
These are clarifying Lieutenant Block's working hours on what he's authorized to do on his schedule.
Okay. And looking at Exhibit 13, the most recent orders, specifically under bullet point 2, is there anything in these orders that say Lieutenant Block is prohibited from swapping a recall?
No. It does say a swap cannot be retroactive, though.
Right. So, if I understand your testimony, you're on the telephone call, you're discussing changes to these specific rules. These specific rules have to do with overtime and swapping, correct?
I know they have to do with swapping and outside jobs. I have to read through it if it has to do with in-house overtime.
Well, the collective bargaining agreement would control in-house overtime, would it not?
Okay. Correct, but there's nothing in, you asked if this was reflective of overtime and swapping, and I don't see
Okay,
where this
well,
is
I'll rephrase my question to limit it to just swapping.
Okay, yes.
Okay. And before your conversation with Lieutenant Block ended, you told him that you were going to speak with the chief.
Yes.
Okay. Now, shortly after that conversation, Lieutenant Block sent you a text message about new arbitrary rules being created and his plan to go to the first selectman, did he not? And that was Exhibit 4 that Attorney Zabel just spoke to you about.
Right.
You responded, Roger, we'll have that conversation. My question is it possible, because you were both speaking about the rules relating to the schedule order, when, because you were both speaking on the phone about the rules related to the scheduling orders, that Lieutenant Block understood your representations to mean that you would get back to him about his ability to swap a recall then?
I do not believe so, no.
I asked if it was possible. You don't believe it was possible that he misunderstood
Possible that he perceived it that way?
that he misunderstood your conversation, perceived it that way, that you would be getting back to him?
No.
Okay, later that evening, Lieutenant Block sent you the email that Attorney Zabel asked you about in Exhibit 1. Having heard no more, I'm going to go in 8 to 4 tomorrow. If the POTS entry gets removed, I'll just be there on my own time. Just FYI. Do you recall that message?
Yes, I do.
And you said you opened it around 9 o'clock in the morning on Sunday?
I think so, yes.
And you never responded to him on it? You never responded to
I
him?
don't believe I did, no.
Okay. When you opened the email and saw Lieutenant Block may have gone in, did you reach out to him and ask him why he violated your order?
I did not.
Okay. If you had, wouldn't you have saved the town some money by telling him to go home? He was not authorized?
At that point, he would have already been in violation of the order.
No, that's what I'm saying, but if you called him and sent him home, it would have saved the town some money.
If I saw it at 10 o'clock, I might have saved the town 6 of the 8 hours.
Okay. When you went into work on Monday, December 2nd, did you reach out to Lieutenant Block and ask why he violated your order?
Eventually, yes, after I had a conversation with Deputy Chief Smith.
And Attorney Zabel asked you, with respect to Exhibit 5, some questions about your intent. What he didn't ask you about was in the middle column, the second one, where you wrote, when I talked to Chris about it, he really did not care.
Mm-hmm.
He said it's all about perception. Was that with respect to the recall? Because you went on and said he has a complaint against the union, not with him.
That was about his perception that Lieutenant Broderick was not representing him and was filing the complaints against him. That's why I said you have a complaint against the union, not him, meaning that's between Jeff and Lieutenant Broderick.
Is it possible that Lieutenant Block had a different understanding of that communication?
Possible.
And not just that one, all the communications, your intent?
In the text, possible, not in the phone call.
Okay. Would you agree that when he texted you any feedback from within, here's the first column in Exhibit 5, where he writes any feedback from within, is it possible that he believed you were to get back to him, you hadn't gotten back to him, he was trying to follow up to check on the appropriateness of his keeping the recall swap in the POS system?
No. Now, the recall was Sunday. This is not until Monday.
No, I understand that. But again, you've heard testimony from Lieutenant Green that Lieutenant Block gave testimony that he was essentially preserving his right to the overtime by sending the email on November 30th, and that had he learned the following day from you that he wasn't able to swap a recall day, he could have changed it in POS. He could have changed a regular work day to a Sunday, and it wouldn't have been a swap of a recall, it would have just been a regular swap.
On Monday?
He could have done it
He could not have done that.
He couldn't have gone in on Tuesday.
Orders are bullet 2, which you just brought up. A swap cannot be retroactive.
That's not just recall swaps?
That's
All swaps?
any swap.
Had they been retroactively done in the past?
Not before this email? I don't know.
Had you ever approved a swap retroactively after the date of this order for Lieutenant Block?
I don't believe so. If you find one, then I made an error.
You told Lieutenant Green that you mistakenly approved Lieutenant Block's swap request. Why was it a mistake?
Because he was allowed to. So Lieutenant Block contacted me via text message on Thanksgiving. He said, if I recall it correctly, he said, "Happy Thanksgiving. Is it okay for me to swap Friday to Sunday?" And I believe I said, "Happy Thanksgiving, go for it." He'd have to something to that effect.
And that would be Exhibit 7.
I don't have the Friday, but okay, I trust you. Yep. That's correct.
And isn't it true that Lieutenant Block asked you personally that the entry be removed from POS before it was sent to payroll?
Did he
By
ask
email?
me during the week?
Did he ask you prior to the payroll being sent over to remove the POS entry?
I believe he asked in person. I don't remember it being a communication. He did communicate something about, well, why isn't it just removed then? Right. Why isn't the entry just removed? Yes.
Got it. July. I have nothing further.
Any questions? Any questions from the commission? Good. Thank you, Chris.
So, he's returning.
Yeah, I'll just say good.
Thank you, Kevin.
Chief Liddy?
I found this part, gentlemen, about to get into some questions, shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, shall be God.
I do.
Just taking an address, please, for the record.
Chris Liddy, L-Y-D-D-Y, 100 Reef Road.
Yeah, good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
How long have you been with the Fairfield Police Department?
Since 1982, approximately 38 years.
And how long have you been chief?
About a year and a half.
And you are generally familiar with the events and circumstances that are described in IA 2019-12 and IA 2020-01.
I am.
And in connection with those internal affairs investigations, you've made a recommendation to this commission. Is that correct?
I have.
And I think a copy of that recommendation is marked as Exhibit 11, if I recall. Exhibit 11, the recommendation regarding discipline that you've made concerning the two IA investigations that are being talked about tonight.
It is.
Will you please explain to the commission why you're making the recommendations that you made?
So I consider the incidents and circumstances for the commission to be extremely serious. Usually we, the command staff, would become aware of deceptive or questionable movement of time or requests for overtime by Lieutenant Block that did not meet our acceptable standards after the fact. Our reaction was to clarify police language to prevent future incidents.
Excuse me, are you reading from something, Chief?
I have notes.
Could we get a copy of the notes?
Sure.
I think we should probably mark them as an exhibit, if
Yeah.
that makes sense, because I wasn't aware that there was. Okay, so we can mark those as an exhibit?
Sure.
Okay.
So usually we were in a position to rewrite policy, clarify directives in order to prevent future incidents. In this incident, we observed a movement of a day off with the intention of working overtime on a Sunday, a practice that we do not condone and frankly defies logic. The order not to come to work on Sunday was clearly communicated, and yet he came to work anyway. He then sat in front of a computer and placed a request to be paid for his attendance on a Sunday, and then approved this request for payment of some $600 for working on a Sunday when we had denied this request. The second violation is equally disturbing. During the internal investigation of this matter, he was untruthful. In actuality, he was more than untruthful. He fabricated an entire series of events that simply did not take place. This was not a one-off. This was not a lapse of memory. This was an entire series of events that had no basis in reality and did not occur. Confidence and trust in the supervisors of any police department is core to the mission of any police department. We have lost confidence in Lieutenant Block to make sound decisions and to do the right thing when no one is looking, but even when everyone is looking. I am making this recommendation for a single rank demotion with great trepidation. My confidence in him is shattered. I have grave concerns regarding his ability to influence others at any supervisory level. My recommendation of a single-step demotion is based on previous history of what we have done in similar circumstances, which will be taken into account before the Connecticut Labor Board on appeal. And it also comes on the advice of counsel. We've done everything we can do to bring Lieutenant Block into the fold and work towards serving the citizens in a meaningful way. Time and time again, he has demonstrated that his interest is in exploitation of our systems and to make as much money as possible. To bring this item forward to the Police Commission, I bring this item forward because it's important. It's vital to our mission that we have competent supervisors setting examples of conduct and behavior. Lieutenant Block has demonstrated in these two cases, as well as others, his belief that the rules do not apply to him. We are at a loss regarding compliance. I am at a loss regarding how to salvage a 32-year veteran who clearly cares nothing about our organization nor the people we serve. I bring this item before the Commission as the most important item that I have or likely ever will have to bring before the Commission. The tone will be set tonight. I can tell you from the bottom to the top, our agency knows the rules. They follow the rules they embrace the rules, and they ask that the one person who flaunts the rules be held accountable. And that's why I'm bringing it forward.
We should, that's a statement, Chief, I think we should mark it as an exhibit.
Do we have the ability to get copies?
I think, yeah.
Thanks,
How would one mark it as?
You know, if, what, 11, I think, how many we got? Yeah.
There were 15? 15. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't have anything further. Craig, if you'd like to wait.
Yeah, I would make that request. Thank you. I could ask some preliminary follow-up questions. You know, move things along. Chief, you said you've been employed at Fairfield since 1982 with the department?
Correct.
And how long have you known Lieutenant Block for?
Since the day he was hired, which was 1986 or 87.
December of 87?
Sounds good.
So is it fair to say that you know him fairly well?
Yes.
And all the time that you've known Lieutenant Block, has he ever been untruthful with you prior to your assertion that he was untruthful with respect to the recall swap?
I'm not sure, but I can't think of a specific example.
But if he wasn't truthful, you would have disciplined him for it.
Depending on the circumstances, yes.
Has he ever disobeyed a direct order that you gave him?
I'm not aware of any.
Has he ever refused to do anything that you asked him to do?
Not that I'm aware of.
Now, you authorized Lieutenant Green to open both internal affairs investigations that bring us here today, did you not?
Correct.
And in addition to these two investigations, on January 29th of 2019, you directed Lieutenant Green to open another internal affairs investigation into certain computer-related violations, did you not?
Correct.
And as a result of the investigation, Lieutenant Block was to have been exonerated from the charges, was he not?
He was not.
And what's the status of that discipline?
We have not issued discipline. The findings of that internal investigation was related to 5 specific policy violations. He was exonerated on 3 of them and sustained on 2 of them.
Okay. And wasn't that investigation and the findings issued on March 24th, 2020?
I don't have that in front of me, but that sounds accurate.
And in addition to the additional internal investigation, isn't it true that you directed Lieutenant Bucrati to open 3 criminal investigations into Lieutenant Block's conduct?
Yes, I'm not sure on the number 3, but
No, we'll go over them. One of the investigations concerned your belief that Lieutenant Block may have committed larceny when he worked the recall swap on December 1st without authorization. Is that correct? And Lieutenant Bucrati found that Block did not commit any criminal violation, didn't he?
I think he found a lack of probable cause.
Right, so with a lack of probable cause, he didn't commit a criminal violation.
Fair enough.
And the second criminal investigation considered your belief that Lieutenant Block may have committed larceny when he put in for acting captain's pay.
Correct.
And similarly, that criminal investigation revealed that he didn't commit a criminal violation in that instance either.
We chose not to pursue that.
Well, isn't it true that there's a provision in the collective bargaining agreement that specifically speaks to acting pay working out of rank?
There is.
And isn't it true that...
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
There's a provision in the collective bargaining agreement that specifically addresses acting pay. So when an officer works out of rank capacity, they get paid an additional amount of money for the additional duties. And it would be in Exhibit 8 under Article 13 on page 14. And isn't it true that you were aware that Lieutenant Buccarati also put in for acting captain's pay?
Yes.
And the third criminal investigation concerned your belief that Lieutenant Block may have committed larceny, amongst other things, with respect to the computer-related violations, correct?
Correct.
And again, no probable cause in that one either.
We chose not to pursue that.
Well, didn't Lieutenant Buccarati find that there was no criminal violations?
He found probable cause didn't exist.
Right, so what would you pursue if there's no probable cause?
Probably none with that, but you failed to ask the question on the second item, which was the acting captain's pay. We believe there was cause there, it just wasn't worth it.
But isn't it true that he found no probable cause? The investigator?
I'm not sure, you'll have to ask him that question.
Chief, who provided you with the information that Lieutenant Block was somehow violating the law and or department policy when he was working on the computer software on company time?
I believe we had a meeting. Actually, I'm not sure who brought that forward. But there was discussion that he had been working, numerous discussions throughout the organization that he had been working on commercial software during company time.
And they found, actually, Lieutenant Green found that in his internal affairs investigation that the department was actually aware of that, and that's why he was exonerated on certain other charges.
I think we were aware of part of it. There were some programs that we had no knowledge of.
Okay. And I just asked this background because when you launched the criminal investigations, you put Lieutenant Block on paid administrative leave, did you not?
We did.
And that was on January 8th of 2020.
Correct.
And he remained on administrative leave till May 21st of 2020.
Correct.
Okay. And during that time, he was not permitted to work any overtime.
Correct.
And he normally works, as testimony from you, a lot of overtime.
Correct.
Okay. In fact, would it surprise you that if Lieutenant Block had not been on administrative leave, based on the average monthly overtime he earned prior to the leave, he would have earned about $60,000 more between January 8th and May 21st?
I haven't done the calculations, but that's not beyond the realm of possibility.
I just asked you that question with respect to damages, that we believe Lieutenant Block has suffered. On June 20th, which is following the Watermill hearing that we had with respect to these two investigations, you issued Lieutenant Block a notice of hearing, and that would be Exhibit 10. Do you have Exhibit 10 in front of you?
I have 11.
Direct your attention to the second paragraph. In that paragraph, for the charges of insubordination and for the violation of the Code of Conduct, you were going to issue him a verbal warning. Is that accurate?
This notice that was sent to him was for the Loudermill hearing, not for...
No, this was issued after the Watermill too.
Yeah, this was actually issued by me in error. Exhibit 11 was the letter that I intended to send him. Exhibit 10 was the letter that I did send him at that time. And then I corrected it several days later by sending him the correct letter.
Now, just several days later, Exhibit 11, you sent to the Secretary of the Police Commission, not to Lieutenant Block. You copied Block on it. But the first letter in Exhibit 10, you sent to Lieutenant Block personally. I don't understand how it was issued in error.
It was the wrong letter. He was supposed to get the letter, the notice of hearing, this was a prior Loudermill hearing letter that I had sent to both you, Lieutenant, and the Secretary of the Commission in error. It was the Loudermill.
Is it true that you sent a different letter to us prior to the Loudermill?
I'm not sure.
Indulge me just 1 minute. I believe I have a copy of it. I'll find it at the break prior.
I believe you are right, though, that the original Loudermill hearing did have some minor changes in this. So,
but
yes.
it's still your intent to issue a verbal warning for...
No.
Oh, it's not
It never was. I think this was... we began to craft this in relation to the two sustained sections on the computer crime, the computer issue.
But this is very specific language with respect to a level of discipline for specific violations?
It is, and it was a mistake. It was a sent in error.
Chief, doesn't Lieutenant Block regularly swap his shifts to Sundays, so he normally works on Sundays, or very frequently works on Sundays?
Frequently works on weekends. We've made several attempts to curtail the Sundays. There's contractual language that gives the chief of police discretion to limit the amount of people we have on Sundays. But yes, I would agree that he does swap to Sundays quite often.
And you never told him specifically you cannot swap to Sundays?
Don't believe I have.
But that would be in your right to do?
Yes.
And there's nothing in the most recent set of orders that prohibit him from working a Sunday, or swapping to the Sunday?
I do not believe there is.
Now, Chief, the statement you read from, did you personally draft this statement?
Yes.
Any assistance?
None.
I don't have anything else.
Any questions from the commission? Chief?
Yes. I got a question on the acting.
Move
captain.
on.
Sorry. Sorry.
Chief, you've indicated that you've lost total confidence in the lieutenant. If he ends up being demoted as a sergeant, he remains in the supervisory position, what kind of assignment would he have?
Probably current discussions would be a patrol sergeant.
But he would still have influence and supervisory responsibilities.
Correct.
So if we have a lack of confidence, why would he put him in that type of situation?
I made this recommendation based on prior cases that I've looked at within the Fairfield Police Department, and there was a feeling that labor boards look at that, and that consistency is important to labor boards. Does not mean I don't have great concerns about it.
Thank you.
Chief, you talked about acting captain. I'm reading the contractual language. You said there was an issue with that. Can you explain further what the issue was?
We went back in time. I forget the exact period of time to look at the acting captain requests and approvals that were made. There were many cases where acting captain was submitted, and we're talking a small dollar amount, somewhere between $50 and $80 if you're working in a grade above what your rank is. We found several occasions where he had submitted for acting captain's pay when there wasn't an opening. The captain was actually at work. We found one that he put in several months after he had worked that day, and it even transcended a fiscal year. So there were some discrepancies. At the end of the day, the dollar value just didn't rise to the level that we felt like entertaining.
So, okay, so he's acting as a captain. What is, in his capacity, was he doing captain's work, or there was a captain already working? So, okay.
We didn't know this was taking place. This is not an automated system like our PAWS system. These are handwritten forms that are submitted to a secretary. We actually did away with acting captain a long time ago, but it was never properly codified. When we realized that this was taking place, and it wasn't across the board, but it was taking place, we stopped the practice. As I had indicated, before, usually we were reactive to these things. Every time we found a discrepancy or a new ability to make money that was not up to our standards, we created new policy.
So, just to clarify, say Lieutenant Block, putting for acting captain sitting when our captain is already working?
There was one or two occasions that we believe that to be true, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah. But Chief was, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Just quickly, because we touched on money a couple times, and we don't know where this ends up, whether it's a sergeant in the patrol division or not. But if we were to just look at those two scenarios today versus that potential, what impact does that potentially have on the amount of overtime available or earnings and things like that? I just don't understand those two levels and how much work there is.
I'm not sure I understand the question, but if Lieutenant Block was demoted to sergeant, okay, and we transferred him, well, his current position is a lieutenant in support services. That doesn't exist as a sergeant, so we would have to transfer him to another division.
Okay.
We haven't quite figured it out, but it probably would be the patrol division. It's the biggest division. What would he be doing? He would be supervising a side of town on a particular shift. So he would have at least 4 officers under his command and would be in command of half of the town of Fairfield.
Thanks.
Chief, just to follow up, if every other commissioner is finished, just as a follow-up to Commissioner Pine's questions, I have the police report from Lieutenant Buccarati in front of me. There were 2 dates before Deputy Chief Smith was promoted that Lieutenant Block submitted acting captain's pay. Those are the 2 dates you were referring to.
I think so, yeah.
All right. Those dates were 11/23 of 18 and 12/7 of 18. Checking the deputy's Outlook calendar for those 2 dates, it appeared as though he had events to attend and may very well have been out of the office. So it's not like he put in for the pay knowing that the captain was not in the building. There's a good chance that the captain was not in the building until Lieutenant Block's.
There is that chance, absolutely, right. Having checked his calendar.
So it's not as nefarious as, the violation, or your concern is not as nefarious as, him intentionally putting in for time he wasn't entitled to.
My concern is, yes, but I concede that point.
And you said you canceled the policy of having acting captains.
Yes.
You are aware that you cannot unilaterally extinguish a contractual provision?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So did you make the union aware that you extinguished the policy of paying acting captains?
I believe the union president was involved in that discussion.
Was there anything memorialized or put in writing extinguishing the practice?
I'm sure there was, but I'd have to check on that.
Check with you. Okay, I have nothing else.
I got a follow. Just to follow up on this captain thing. So the captain was out of the building, and Lieutenant Block put in for captain's pay. I don't understand. You're still getting paid by the town of Fairfield. How do you put in for captain's pay if your captain's working?
The difference in pay between the lieutenant.
Let me just say for the record, from the department's point of view, that background questioning by Attorney Manamite, which I assume was meant to establish some sort of bias or prejudice, is not at issue in this proceeding as far as the town and the department is concerned. We are not making the town and the department are not making any claim in this hearing that having anything to do with the acting captain position. That was cross-examination by Attorney Manamite. We're not asserting any misconduct based on acting captain pay in connection with this proceeding or otherwise. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Okay. My question was basically, you mentioned it in his testimony. So.
Well, that was because it was in response to questions by Attorney Manamite who raised the issue. And so again, that's not part of the town or the department's position in this particular proceeding.
Well, does it go towards credibility?
That you can have to ask what Attorney Manamite wants to say about that. Good.
No other questions? No, Shelley, go ahead.
You had mentioned on that Sunday when Lieutenant Block was not supposed to come in and he did, he was working on the computers. Is that something common, or can you just clarify that for me, please?
We had opened an investigation regarding software that the lieutenant had been developing. He has his own company and develops software, and we do use maybe 7 or 8 years ago. We purchased a product from him, just a piece of software that is used within the department. But we had two concerns: that the software, and I guess the only version of the software existed on our servers, and that we might have purchased inadvertently server space solely for this piece of software that, whether we knew about it or didn't know about it is a contentious point. So we did open an investigation, but again, that was not sustained. There was just not enough proof there to bring any charges.
Okay, thank you.
There are no other questions?
I'm sorry, I just have one more as follow-up to the Commissioner's question. Isn't it true that Lieutenant Green found through his investigation that Deputy Chief Smith and Captain Tercey were both aware of what Jeff was developing on town time while working in the capacity of a lieutenant?
Are we at the acting captain?
No, we're at the computer investigation.
I believe there's a conflict in statements there, but I don't think he made that final determination.
Okay. And I know this isn't part of this proceeding, but just because the Commissioner asked the question, I have the Internal Affairs Investigation Report, and Lieutenant Green, and I believe you did sign off on it, found that command staff personnel knew or should have known that they were developing software while working in the capacity of a Fairfield police lieutenant. His actions were not a violation. He also exonerated him from the charge because he conducted the business of this agency, meaning the police department, while working on the frontline software. Not a violation because he was authorized to do it. In fact, the town paid for the hardware he needed to develop the software. Did I say that right?
Software.
The town bought the software needed to advance the frontline program. So just so the commission's clear, there was no wrongdoing with respect to anything he did working on company time, developing software. Is that accurate?
I think that's an accurate finding. We did not pursue it and closed it.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The department and the town reps in the presentation of the chief, so.
I just 1 minute to go get my witness.
I'll go get it.
Well, I want to see. Okay, we're good. Just going to wait for Lieutenant Block to return.
Broderick, B-R-O-D.
D-E-R-I-C-K?
Yep. First name's Keith, Lieutenant.
Stand safe and forward. Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear testimony you're about to give in the case question shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Would you state your name and address, please, for the record?
Keith Broderick, 10 Sally Ann Drive, Trumbull, Connecticut, 46611.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Lieutenant.
Good evening.
Just have a couple questions for you with respect to your knowledge of the pending disciplinary action. How long have you been employed by the Fairfield Police Department?
27 years.
And what's your current assignment?
Lieutenant in patrol.
And are you in a union?
I am.
Which one?
Cops Local 550.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what local 550?
Cops Local 550.
Do you hold an executive board position with the union?
I do.
And which position is that?
President.
And how long have you been the president of the union?
13 years.
It's unusual, a long time. Just enjoy a tremendous amount of support from the membership. Keep getting reelected. What are some of your duties and responsibility as a union president with respect to the contract and monitoring overtime?
I'll just make sure our contract's adhered to and everybody following the rules.
Okay. And if anybody has a complaint with the distribution of overtime, what do you do?
We usually address it with administration and put a stop to it.
Okay. Let's talk about what brings us here today. Are you familiar with the swap that Lieutenant Block entered into POS on Sunday, December 1st, for a recall swap on December 1st, 2019?
Is that the one that we're talking about that is moved? Is that the date? Yes.
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 It was actually entered into POS on the 27th and moved to Sunday, the 1st.
Okay, yes.
And that's, okay. How are you familiar with that?
It was brought to my attention by numerous people, and I saw it myself.
And after you saw the entry in POTS, what did you do?
I talked to Chief Smith about it and asked if he was allowed to, Lieutenant Black was allowed to move his recall day, which Smith's response was no, he is not, absolutely not.
And did you approach Deputy Chief Smith before or after the shift was worked?
Before the shift was worked.
And why would you approach Deputy Chief Smith about it?
Because there's multiple divisions involved. He was the supervisor handling the ongoing issues that we were having with work assignments with Lieutenant Block, so I went to Chief Smith and spoke to him about it.
Okay. Are you aware of any contractual provision or departmental policy which allows an employee to swap recall days?
I am not.
Are you aware of a contract provision or a departmental policy which prohibits it?
I am not.
What did Deputy Chief Smith tell you he was going to do about the swap?
He was going to have them cancel it and not allow them to work it.
Did there come a point in time after December 1st, the shift that was worked, that you spoke with Deputy Chief Smith about the recall swap again?
Yes.
And what prompted you to speak with the deputy about the swap?
I think people were unsure if he worked it or not, and they were pointing out that he was still in the system as working the recall on a Sunday. So I went to Deputy Chief Smith and asked him if he worked the recall or not.
And would you tell the commission how that conversation went?
Just like I started, I asked if he worked the recall. Chief Smith told me he was told not to, was unsure if he worked it or not, said he'd find out. My conversation was just don't pay him. If he was told not to work and he worked, just don't pay him. And Chief Smith's response was, we have to pay him if you work, which to me didn't make sense. You're told not to do something, you do it, you shouldn't be compensated for it. But that was his answer. So when I said, just take it out of POS, he says, we can't, and we want the violation. What do you mean you want the violation? Well, we told him not to do something. We're unsure if he did it. If he did it, let him make the violation, and I have to pay him anyway.
So just to make it clear, the deputy chief said to you, I want the violation?
Yes.
And what did you understand we want the violation to mean?
That if he worked it, because I understand the rhetoric that went back and forth with it, about I'll work on my own time and all that. Told him not to come to work. He came to work, he put in for it.
Okay. Would it have been possible prior to the entry getting sent over to payroll to remove it from POS?
Yes, I believe so. My understanding.
Is it common at the Fairfield Police to make changes to POS entries retroactively?
Sometimes, yeah, we modify them because there's a change tab to do that before payroll closes.
I'm sorry.
There's before payroll closes, there's a tab where we can change people over time.
So when a supervisor sees an incorrect entry in POS, you have the ability to remove or correct the entry?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have with this one.
So, a change in POS would not affect Lieutenant Block's disregard of the order that he was given, right?
Correct.
And so this isn't a matter of a correct or incorrect entry in POS. It's a matter of whether Lieutenant Block disregarded a direct order, correct?
Correct.
And nothing that you've said about what Deputy Chief Smith said or anything else changes the fact that based on the facts as you understood them and as Deputy Chief Smith understood them, Lieutenant Block disregarded a direct order, correct?
Correct.
No further questions.
The commission have any questions?
I just have one follow-up before the commission. Isn't it true that Deputy Chief Smith's statement that he wanted a violation somehow created a bias against Lieutenant Block, in your opinion?
I don't believe so.
What was the purpose of saying we want the violation? Or you...
Evidentiary? I can't really speak to what he was thinking.
Okay, nothing else.
Thank you.
So,
Good.
thank you very much.
The union's next witness is Lieutenant Block. He's going to be a while. Does anybody want to take a break?
Let's take 10 minutes and we'll come back.
Would you describe the conversation you and Captain Tercey had during the phone conversation on November 30th?
Yes, he called me up. He said that Broderick had complained about me again to the deputy chief. The deputy chief saw that I was working overtime on Sunday, which would be December 1st, and that the deputy chief said, I can't work that overtime.
Okay. Now, this is important. You recall the testimony that Captain Tercey gave today?
Yes.
Did you bring up the issue of recall swaps to Captain Tercey?
I did.
All right. And what did Captain Tercey say to you specifically with respect to your ability to work on Sunday?
Well, he initially said you can't work overtime on Sunday. Is that what you mean?
Yes. Did he say that you couldn't swap a day to Sunday?
No.
But just you can't work overtime?
Correct.
And then did there come a time when you refresh his recollection about the fact that he approved the swap?
Yes.
And would you tell the commission how that conversation went?
Certainly. When he called me and said I couldn't work the overtime on Sunday, I assumed that he had just seen it as an errant entry or something that I don't have the right to do. I can't just put myself in for overtime on a given day. So when he said you can't work overtime on Sunday, that made sense to me. Then I reminded him, this is that swap that you had already approved.
Okay. And did you talk about anything else with Captain Tercey during that phone conversation?
Yes, after I reminded him about the swap, at least that's what I felt I had done. We talked about whether there is or is not a rule against it and why that rule would just be targeted to me and not others.
And when you say a rule, were you referring to the scheduling orders that have been talked about tonight, the two scheduling orders?
No, that did not mention recall swaps. Just this one in particular, this was the first time I had heard that I couldn't work a recall swap. So I said I had not heard about that. Is that something that applies only to me?
And how did the phone call between you and Captain Tercey end?
He said he would, and all I could do is paraphrase, but it ended with him saying that he would communicate with the deputy chief again.
And so what was after your conversation with the captain, what was your understanding of the status of the order not to work overtime on Sunday?
Well, it was delayed.
I'm sorry, it was
delayed. It was put on hold. But again, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't work the overtime, so no matter what, even though it was delayed, that's why I said I will go in on my own time.
What do you mean you wouldn't work the overtime?
Well, I wouldn't take that risk. He said, don't work that overtime. He said he would check back with the deputy chief. Okay. So, go ahead.
Okay, so after you had that conversation with with Captain Tercey, did you have any other communication with the captain on Saturday, November 30th after the phone call?
Yes, I sent him a text message shortly thereafter and then email later that night.
Okay. And I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 4. And I'm going to hand you Exhibit 5 as well. Would you tell the commission what you meant by this email?
Email or?
I'm sorry, text message, Exhibit 4.
Okay, the first one that was sent at 14:39 hours on the 30th. I said, sorry for you being in the middle, but I didn't put you there. This had been an ongoing issue with me being given orders that did not apply to anybody else in the department. I was being accused of things within those orders and each time denied the right to refute them or explain. And this just seemed like a progression of that. So the first select woman had recently come into office and sent an email out saying that she had an open door policy. This was escalating to the point where I said, if I keep getting attacked, I will avail myself of this. And that was that text message.
Okay. And Captain Tercey acknowledges that he would have the conversation, correct?
Yes.
And what did you understand Captain Tercey's reply to mean? Who was he going to have the conversation with?
Either deputy chief, the chief, or both.
Okay. And after you hung up with him on the telephone call, prior to that, and he said he was going to go to the chief, who did you think he was going to speak to at that time?
Initially, when I hung up with him on the phone, I thought he would just go to the deputy chief because it was his order.
Okay.
This one, then I thought maybe it was one or both.
Okay. Did Captain Tercey ever get back to you on Saturday?
No.
Okay. So when he didn't get back to you, what, if anything, did you do?
I was about to go to sleep, I think 10:09 p.m., and it occurred to me when I was about to set my alarm that I had never heard back from him. After 10 p.m., I would not call somebody. I would not text them because it's rude. Why wake them up? So I remember thinking about it for a few minutes. How could I protect my rights at the same time as not risking the violation of an order? And I thought of the way I will send him an email that he could, if he doesn't see it right then, he will see it in the morning. And the only person I put at risk is myself. I'll go in, I'll work for free, whatever, to make sure I don't violate an order, but at the same time I protect my rights in case he had just forgotten to get back to me.
What do you mean you'll protect your rights?
Well, if he had forgotten to get back to me after talking to the deputy chief or chief and the order had been overturned, and then he gets back to me on Sunday, or I happen to see him at work on Monday, and he goes, oh yeah, I forgot to get back to you. You could have worked that overtime. Well, I lost that right. So the way of protecting my right to work that in case and not putting the town at risk of losing money is to go in and I'll take all the risk.
Have you ever worked for free in the past?
Many times.
Can you give me some examples?
I'll give you several. On, I think, August 19th, 2019, there was a big storm through town, a microburst, and I came upon a tree crew working on Burst Street up by the Parkway. Obviously, power's out, but they're working right over the hump of the Parkway, so any cars coming over would put them at risk. So I flipped on my lights, I had a take-home car, and I sat with them for 4 or 5 hours. I never put in for overtime.
Any other occasions when?
Hundreds. As shift commander, we wouldn't like to dump, we had to handle prisoners, we had to handle reports, etc. So if it came to shift change and there was work to do, we'd stay. We'd make sure it gets done rather than dump it on someone else. And not just myself, nobody put in for that. There's also something called Arnold Markle training, which is search and seizure training for police. And I'm not sure if this is still the case, but for years in the department, you were on your own to go to that. You didn't get pay. It was well known.
Okay. Let's go back to December 1st. Did you go to the PD at 8 o'clock that day?
You had about 20 of.
Okay. And did you stay in the building until 4 o'clock?
Almost.
What do you mean almost?
And I may have left for lunch.
Okay.
But I left, I think according to Lieutenant Buccarati, who looked at the videos, it was probably, I don't know, somewhere after 3. I probably went to lunch or something.
And did you thereafter put in for overtime for working the day?
Thereafter, no.
What do you mean by that?
I had put in for overtime for my regular Friday, which I was allowed to do.
And when did you do that?
I don't remember. Maybe it was Thursday, maybe it was the day before.
Was it the day that Captain Tercey approved your request?
I doubt it. It may have been the day before because I knew that Friday overtime was coming up. I don't remember when I entered that.
Okay.
But when Captain Tercey approved the swap from Friday to Sunday, then I dragged it over from one day to the other.
Okay.
The characterization that I came in on Sunday and sat behind the computer and entered overtime is patently false.
And you're referring to Chief Liddy's testimony?
Yes.
That he said that's what you did?
Correct.
So when did you actually drag it over from Friday to Sunday?
On Friday.
After you were authorized by?
After I was authorized. I believe it was Friday.
Okay. At any time between 8 and 4 on December 1st, did Captain Tercey respond to your email?
Never responded to the email.
Okay. Did he call you that day and ask why you went into work on Sunday?
No.
The next day, December 2nd, did you go to work?
I went to an overtime job at Sacred Heart University.
Okay. When you started work that day, did anyone from the administration contact you and ask you why you went into work the day before?
No.
Did you reach out to Captain Tercy on December 2nd at any time?
Yes.
Why?
Because I hadn't heard back from him from the email. I wanted to find out if the shift I had put in on Sunday, the day prior, was a recall or was it going to be a swap or what was it? I did not want to accept overtime for something I shouldn't have had.
At that time, were you able to change POS entries after the fact?
Yes.
Are you allowed to change POS entries now, retroactively?
Yes. We do that all the time as supervisors.
Okay, let's get back to your conversation with Captain Tercy on the 2nd. What manner of communication did you use when you texted him? I'm referring specifically to Exhibit 5.
On December 2nd, text message.
Right. And you asked him, according to this exhibit, any feedback from within. How did you interpret his response?
Oh, that they were fine with the recall swap. Otherwise, I would have removed it.
Okay. And did he say both chiefs were fine?
Well, he did. He said he spoke to both chiefs. I spoke to both chiefs. They said they understood. Chris was absolutely fine with it. Don was fine. Maintained recalls are discretionary.
And do you recall Captain Tercy's testimony here tonight with respect to his intent of these messages?
Yes.
Was that how you understood the messages, his responses?
No.
And just again, for the commission's benefit, what was your thought? What did you feel he was trying to relate to you?
We are so far apart on what that meant. There's no way that meant they're fine with going to talking to Brenda Kupchak.
During the text exchange, did Captain Tercy ask you why you violated his direct order?
No.
Did he ever ask you?
I don't remember him ever saying anything.
Did he remind you that he told you that you weren't permitted to swap the recall from Friday to Sunday?
No.
Okay, so on Monday, nobody made you aware that you had done anything in violation of an order?
Exactly the opposite. They told me they were fine.
And when did you find out there was an issue with you working the recall swap on Sunday?
I think it was Wednesday.
The 4th? Would have been the 4th?
Sounds right.
How were you made aware?
By email
From
Deputy Chief.
Okay, and what did Deputy Chief Smith's email say?
Something regarding he'll have to schedule an appointment to speak with me in reference to that.
And did he tell you that meeting may result in disciplinary action?
I don't recall.
Okay. What did you do in response?
I think I sent him screenshots to prove that I had never intended to take anything I wasn't entitled to.
I'm going to show you in Exhibit 1 an email. Actually, that you had sent. Is this the email that you sent Captain Smith? That would be a copy of Lieutenant Block's email to Captain Tercy.
But you're talking about in here? Within here?
No, I asked after you received the email from Captain Smith where you said he wanted to schedule a meeting, did you send him anything?
Yes. I believe an email.
Dave, we don't have this in evidence, I can certainly make copies, but this is the email correspondence between Jeff Block and Deputy Chief Smith and Chief Liddy. I can certainly make copies and if you enter it.
Yeah. Okay, that's an exhibit, yeah.
Okay. You need a copy? Yeah. I'll take the original. Thank you. Make the court has 16? 16. Black, you want to take a minute to read that?
I have.
Do you recognize this?
Yes.
All right. And why did you send this to the chief and deputy chief?
I thought there was a misunderstanding that they thought maybe I was trying to do something that I wasn't entitled to. I was trying to prove that wasn't the case.
At any time after December 1st, did you ask anyone to remove the recall swab from POS?
Multiple times.
Okay, who did you ask?
Captain Tercey, Lieutenant Green. I think Captain Tercey more than once.
And why would you ask them to remove it?
Because if I'm not entitled to it, I don't want it.
Did anyone remove the entry?
No.
Let's talk about Lieutenant Green's investigation and his finding that you were somehow untruthful when you provided testimony during your December 12th interview. First, were you ever interviewed by Lieutenant Green and given an opportunity to explain the inconsistencies between your testimony and Captain Tercey's testimony?
No.
And do you recall the interview with Lieutenant Green?
I do.
At any point in the interview, did you tell Lieutenant Green that you did not recall and or were not certain of the specific facts needed to respond to some of Lieutenant Green's questions?
I was definitely foggy on some of the details.
And you made it clear to him that you did not remember?
Yes.
Okay. How would you describe your recollection of facts as the interview progressed?
As I started hearing things, such as I didn't remember which day the conversation between myself and Captain Tercey occurred, it made sense to me based on the fact that I knew I wasn't at work on a given day, et cetera.
Did you answer his questions to the best of your recollection?
Of course.
Were you trying to be purposely deceitful?
No, in fact, the things that he says I was inaccurate on have no bearing on the case.
What do you mean?
Well, the fact, if we're face-to-face or we're over the phone, neither one makes me more believable. Has nothing to do with it.
Do you think you gained anything
No.
if you were in fact lying about where the conversation took place?
That's what I'm saying. No, not at all, or which day it took place.
During the interview, you provided testimony that you felt the conversation between you and Tercey on November 30th was face-to-face at police headquarters. Is that possible?
No, not in this case, although that recollection happened. Like, that happened in the recent past, where he spoke to me in my office and then turned and went towards the chief's office. I just connected them wrong.
In Lieutenant Green's internal affairs report, he writes, it's not reasonable to believe that Captain Tercey would contact Lieutenant Block and prohibit him from working a scheduled overtime shift the following day without providing the reason for the decision. Do you agree with that?
No, it's absurd.
Why not?
Because if I call anybody on the administrative schedule and say, you're in the schedule to work Sunday overtime, I wouldn't need a reason. Nobody would.
Would you explain to the commission, with respect to your interview, that Lieutenant Green testified about, where he asked you specifically if Captain Tercey explained to you the reason why you couldn't work the recall shift on Sunday? You said he didn't explain it to you?
Initially, he didn't. When he called, he said, you can't work the overtime on Sunday, and explained that Broderick had complained to the deputy chief, et cetera. That's why I reminded him that Sunday I hadn't just entered it willy-nilly so that I could get overtime. That was what he had approved.
And as you sit here today, do you believe that Captain Tercey put your order on hold?
So I believe they put on hold.
Was it your understanding that he put it on hold?
Yeah, that's how I took it, but I didn't take the risk. That's why I said I'll be there on my own time.
And that was because you did not want to violate it. Was that because you did not want to violate an order?
Absolutely. Nor do I want anything I'm not entitled to.
And is that the reason why you reached out to Captain Tercey to follow up on December 2nd?
Yes. If I was trying to steal something, why would I remind anybody?
Is there anything else you'd like to say to the commission with respect to this?
Yes. I made some notes. Well, first of all, I already mentioned that Chief Liddy characterized the fact that I entered overtime on Sunday. That's not true. Deputy Chief Smith had said the same thing in his email or letter to Lieutenant Green. It's not true. As far as the way I'm being attacked, I will say I transferred from the patrol division to support services, like I said, in 2018. On one of my last days, Sergeant Riendo, who's worked under me for several years, and we worked together prior to that, he's about to be made lieutenant, and he's an Marine. This is what he sent me. It's been an honor working with you. It's often not appreciated around here, but I certainly appreciate your dedication to what's right for the department and for the forgotten practice called police work. I'll always defend the good you did to the few naysayers around here. And there are two sergeants on Midnight. The other one, Sergeant Zadru, said, been a pleasure for the better part of 19 years on MIDS. So I've never been as angry as I am now in my life, the way I'm attacked. I'll tell you that. I did this yesterday. I broke a sack in my elbow at work. I'm here. I didn't have to be here. Just a little bit about myself. I finished the police academy #1. I finished detective school #1, both in class and notebook, which are the two judges. Received many awards. I won't go through them. I'll bring up one example, and I can show you. Captain Tercy and I worked a road job together, and on May 10th, 2019, he texted me and said, put in for 0700 start, so 7 a.m. start for the job. And I replied, I got here just around 7:30. I'll put in for then. I like to be squeaky clean. Even on the Sunday shift, that's in question. Nobody's watching. It started at 8 a.m. I showed up at 7:40. I'm always early. Captain Tercy said there was no possible way I could have misunderstood what he said regarding he would approach the chief. I don't know how anybody says that. Even if that was the case, this text message sent maybe 7 minutes later said he'll have the conversation with the chief. So the fact that that night I said I haven't heard back from you, Lieutenant Green says Block had no reason to be expecting a call. He's just trying to cover his tracks. This proves differently. I think that's it.
Other questions? Proceed, would like to take a break, or I'm sorry? I'm going to proceed with the cross, or would you like? Sure, no worries. Okay. Yes. Lieutenant Block.
Yes, sir.
You were here when we played the recording of the interview.
Yes, sir.
You said, I remember him sticking his head in. You said, when Tercy poked his head in. You said, to Lieutenant Green, when Tercy left to go talk to the deputy chief. You said, Tercy told you on Saturday, November 30th, let me go talk to the deputy after he turned around in the office. You said, whatever I said turned him around to go back to the deputy. You said, I remember him poking his head into the office. He said, I remember seeing him face to face. You say, I remember him poking his head in. I remember seeing him face to face. He turned around and went toward the deputy's office. And you said just a moment ago to this commission, well, there's no reason why you would say all that because it's not relevant. Well, isn't it relevant to try to convince this commission that if you, quote, misunderstood the order, to come up with a story that says, explains why, you had this big interaction with Captain Tercy and how you misunderstood things, and therefore it was really reasonable for you to have misunderstood the order that you gave?
No, sir. I don't even deny they told me don't work the overtime. Certainly, if I was to make that up, I'd say I'd end the conversation with Tercy told me it was okay to work.
Okay, and that recording was a true and accurate recording of what you said
Yes,
during
sir.
the investigation?
Yes, sir. I was wrong. I had the fact wrong.
And you were advised that you were being questioned in connection with an official investigation?
Yes, sir.
Right? And you understood that you were required to tell the truth in connection with an official investigation? And you understood that anything you said during that interview could be used in department disciplinary proceedings against you?
Absolutely.
And just a minute ago, you said that, well, you tried to tell this commission that you thought that the order was in abeyance, right?
Yes, sir.
But then you also, just a few minutes ago, said that you sent the email because you didn't want to, quote, risk violation of an order. If the order was in abeyance, there was no order to be risk violation, was there?
No, sir, that's inaccurate.
You said just in your earlier testimony, and we can have it read back if we need to, I sent the email and basically because not to risk violation of an order.
Sir, I went in on my own time not to risk violation of an order.
Okay, well.
I did that to protect my rights to the overtime.
Okay, well, the commission can hear the testimony and hear exactly what you said about that, just like they can listen to the testimony again of what you said during the hearing. Now, I guess you would agree with me, would you not, Lieutenant Block, that there is no way that what you say with your conversation with Captain Tercey squares with what he says the conversation he had with you?
Well, I think that's too vague. The mode of communication, the location of where it took place.
Captain Tercey testified in front of this commission that he gave you an order. He said that you were ordered not to go in, that there was no way that that was clear, that that was specific, and that was never put in abeyance.
No, sir, that's not accurate. He did not tell me not to go in. He told me not to work overtime. And there's a huge distinction. I said I would go in for free. My thought was if he had gotten back to me and said, no, the decision was made, you can't have that overtime, well, then I'll swap my Monday because I was going to Sacred Heart University, so I had to work a double. I was working from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., midnight. So my intention was if that overtime was not approved, I would take that Monday shift and put it on Sunday. One way or another, I planned on working that Sunday.
You were told, he told you not to go in, didn't he?
No, sir. No, he told me not to work the overtime.
So,
Sir, if I could clarify, by that logic, if they had called me for overtime or needed me for an emergency, I would have had to say no. He did not tell me don't go in.
well, what you could have said in that situation was, well, I've been ordered not to go in. Is that order being countermanded? That's what you could have said, correct?
But I was not ordered not to go in.
Well, I guess that's the issue that the commission will have to decide, right?
Well, no, sir, because I did not work the overtime anyway.
You went into work, you showed up at the Fairfield Police Department on Sunday, correct?
Yes.
Did you have a uniform on?
Yes.
And did you perform departmental duties and functions on that Sunday?
Yes.
And so you worked on that Sunday as a Fairfield police officer,
Yes,
correct?
sir. But it could have been a swap and it could have been for free.
And you were told not to work that Sunday?
No, sir.
Isn't that true?
No, sir. I was told not to work the overtime. There's no reason I couldn't work a Sunday. Had Captain Tercey gone back to me and said, you can't have the overtime, he almost certainly would have approved me taking my Monday and moved it to Sunday. He never said no to that.
Lieutenant Block, you understand that as an officer with the Fairfield Police Department, if you're given a lawful order by a superior officer in the department, you're required to obey that order, right?
Of course.
And you didn't do that here, right?
That's not correct. I was told not to work the overtime shift. Why would I ever be told not to go into headquarters?
Was any portion of your statement during the interview that you had this face-to-face conversation with Captain Tercey true?
Yes, sir.
You had a face-to-face conversation with Captain Tercey?
No, you said any part of the conversation.
No, I said was any portion of your testimony that you had a face-to-face conversation with Captain Tercey on November 30 true?
I'm sorry, but I've got to get technical. You're saying was any part of the testimony? The entire testimony I gave, very little was inaccurate, but I admit it.
Was any of your testimony that you had a face-to-face conversation with Captain Tercey true?
So the face-to-face part, absolutely wrong. The mode of communication, absolutely wrong. And I could try to explain that. I worked the midnight shift that night, and I believe I was awoken by Captain Tercey. And this is how my memory worked. There is no logical reason I would lie about that. It does nothing for me. If I was to lie to try to cover my tracks, I would have said it ended with, he said, yeah, you could work the overtime. Or, you know what? Until I talk to the deputy chief, this order's on hold. I didn't say anything that would cover me in the slightest. These are inconsequential things. Do I like that they're inaccurate? Of course not. But they are.
got no further questions.
Nothing else.
Does the commission have any questions? Any further questions?
I have no further questions.
Could I add one more thing?
Sure.
I know the question of working Sundays came up. My role in the department is to supervise the dispatch center, my main role, which is a 24/7 operation, information technology, which is 24/7. Not only can I do the same work on a Sunday, I can do it better because there are less distractions. I can do my work there. The fact that the contract gives the chief the right, and I'm not denying he has the right elsewhere to make this change, but the contract language omits support services division from where it says Sundays should not be filled. I can only assume that's because we supervise 24/7 operations, but it's very common between myself and Captain Terzi to work Sundays because it's as relevant as any other day of the week. If I could also add, as far as software, I have never worked on a piece of software that I did not give or provide to the Fairfield Police Department. The software called Frontline that's in question right now is a much updated version of the software they bought. I wasn't trying to conceal anything. I gave demonstrations to the majority of the command staff in the department. So the thought that's being brought about here, that I was trying to make commercial progress on something that would not benefit the department, again, wholly untrue. I spent literally thousands of my own hours developing software for the department and provided at no expense. Everything was above board. The chief said that I violate orders, and I don't remember his terminology, but I do anything to earn money at the cost of it. It's absolutely not true. Every swap I did, every flex I did, went through Captain Terzi, and I did them by text to have proof. I am not the rogue I'm being painted as.
Any other comments? I guess what we'd like to do, if there are no objections, is we'd like the commission to go into a private session to discuss these issues.
Okay.
We'll probably stay here since all our paperwork's here.
There's a private room set up.
About the issues here, and we want to go into getting this list promulgated.
We have to go into getting this what?
Emotional.
You're done, Shirley.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Moving
yeah.
other business now.
Works for me. Okay.
Peter.
Now, you want to put on the record as far as
busy with this. Anything else?
We can wait.
Let me just hand it off and then I can step out.
This is the next item on the agenda.
Okay, so
It's
I
nothing to do
I
with the
can-
hearing.
It's right here.
Yep, good job.
Thank you.
We ask that you read in this order into the record, not including this.
Okay.
And at this rank, that black zone is different than the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, who's the normal lady that does all this here, right? So what do I do? Just write it on paper and give it to you, or? I mean, I'm just reading this.
Yeah, you're reading it, and then what you're going to do is someone's going to make a motion based on the chief's recommendations.
Okay, these are the captain's examination 2020 results. In July of 2020, an examination for the position of captain was conducted by Badge Quest Incorporated. Below are the final scores and rankings. Rank number 1, John Bucciarati. Number 2, Jeffrey Block. We recommend that this list be good for 15 days from the date of the promulgation. Is there a motion to accept this list?
Can we bifurcate the motion as to the individuals involved?
I think we're just we're just promulgating this list for 15
So
days.
you're
right?
looking for a motion to do it for the year's time?
For 15 days.
No, Captain's 15 days.
This is just for 15 days for these two. Number 1, John Bucciarati, 2, Jeffrey Block. Recommend that the list be good for 15 days from the date,
So moved.
from today's date.
Second.
Do your vote, or you want me to just, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed, abstentions, all right, carries unanimously, so.
Congratulations, Captain.
Thank you very much.
I don't have to write anything, right?
No, you
All right, in July 2020, an examination for the position of lieutenant was conducted by Batch Quest Incorporated. Below are the final scores and rankings. Number 1, Gregory Gunther. Number 2, Matthew Rando, okay. Number 3, Edward Nook. Number 4, Felix Esposito. Number 5, Michael Paris. Number 6, Hector Izari. Did I do it right? And number 7, Daniel Vander Hayden.
Good.
Pretty good. There's a recommendation that this list be good for 1 year from tonight's date. Is there a motion?
Make the motion.
Peter?
Second.
Ron seconds. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, good with the lieutenants. Okay, this is for the sergeant's examination 2020. This has the same preamble. Here's the list for sergeants. Number 1, Evan Kaisman. Number 2, Romaine Chamberlain. Number 3, James Wiltsey. Number 4, Donald Matijik. Okay. Number 5, Richard Peck. Number 6, Michael Kahn. Number 7, Seth Jenkins. Number 8, Jordan Nadeau. Number 9, Nicole Gerosa. Number 10, John McGrath. Number 11, Christopher Rubis. Number 12, William Beatty. Number 13, Raymond Quills. Number 14, Michael Zarella. Number 15, Edward Terafay. Number 16, Michael Mazzochi. And number 17, Thomas Gordon. Is there a motion?
I move to accept.
This is to list to be good for 1 year from tonight's date. Motion by Peter, second by Charlene. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Okay. Let's see if there's anybody left in the department. Anybody not take these notes? All right, so the same preamble. This is for detectives for 2020. The following is the list. Number 1, Michael Cowell. Number 2, Michael Zarella. Number 3, Michael Mazzochi. I hope. Number 3, Nicole Gerosa. Number 5, Romaine Chamberlain. Number 6, Tiffany Bennett. Number 7, Brian Griffin. And this detectives list would be good for a 1 year period from tonight's date. Is there a motion?
Motion accept.
Motion to accept by Ron, second Jack Stone. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
All right.
Chief?
We'll draw up
There you
minutes
go.
and get you the time at some point.
Okay.
Chief, do we have anything else to cover before we adjourn this meeting?
There is nothing else. We were going to discuss a potential hiring date for some lateral people who have an interest, but I don't have them in place yet. So I'll reach out to you in the next couple weeks to see if we can formulate a date to interview 4 to 5 candidates.
And Chief, all this paperwork involved in this, should we leave
I
it
will take
here?
care of all that. You can leave it right where it is.
So, can I just address the motion regarding promotion?
Sure, Jim. They move this over.
Is our,
We've got to make a motion to adjourn and move it over.
Well, I think there's,
okay.
new business
Our-
tonight.
The business tonight.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, but
So you need to.
the captain on-
Are you out of session or in session?
No, we gotta we gotta make a motion to,
We're gonna make a motion
want
here.
to make a motion?
Yeah.
So we're gonna make a motion to postpone
Existing, tonight's meeting
the verdict from the
to a date.
trial to date certain in the next,
And the next scheduled meeting of the police commission.
sounds good. Peter just made that motion, I'll second it. All in favor? Abstention. Okay.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Well, no, new business, they want new business. Bob, you have new business? No, you're good?
Or even address that, Chief.
All right. All right, well, just anything else, email us, we're always around.
Yeah. Okay.
Your favorite part.
Yes, motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
We're done. All right.
September 9th.
Favorite part.